3, 2, 1.
Welcome back, everybody. We are here. It is episode 72 of And the Year was 1985, the podcast. So we got a very, very special guest here this evening. Hailing from St. John's, Newfoundland, Mr. Hulk Caesar. Welcome in, my friend.
Thank you, gentlemen.
How are you?
Thank you, Brad.
How's it going?
I'm doing fantastic.
Hey.
Thank you so much for inviting me into your fantastic podcast. I'm so excited to talk about wrestling.
I think we all are. So, yeah, we've been kind of shooting the shit for about half an hour more, keeping Caesar up late.
Yeah, definitely appreciate it. And yeah, we know it's late.
I normally we're doing a late show next weekend or this weekend, and we're doing it at 8 p.m. because that's late night for me.
Nice. We're just getting started at around 8 around here.
So before we get started into the wrestling, we want to get a little bit into you and what you do and how you got started and what you're doing. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, well, I grew up in Newfoundland, out around the Bay, and came to St. John's in the mid 1990s. And while I was in St. John's, I started doing a little bit of radio on CHMR FM on Mun Radio. We used to do me and my friend did the morning show for the high school kids Monday, Wednesday, and Friday in 1996. Nice. We did that for a little bit, and then I kind of jetted off to Vancouver for 20 years. I got cancer when I was there, possibly because of the West Coast vibes, and moved back to Newfoundland for my treatment, which was totally successful, and I'm totally fine now. And once I was better, I thought, I'd like to kind of get back into this radio stuff again because everybody says I have a face for radio. So I got back to CHMR, and COVID started immediately after my treatment. So I was doing CHMR remotely. They offered me an interview with Kim Mitchell, nice. Which I'd never interviewed anyone before, but I interviewed Kim Mitchell, and he was so super nice and so super gracious. And the interview sucked, and I never released it, but I had a lot of fun doing it. And I realized, we're in COVID now, so I can get all kinds of people. So I started reaching out to agents and ended up getting Sam Roberts and Matt Mays, Dan Mangan, Hannah Georges, Honeymoon Suite, Sloan, a bunch of big kind of Canadian bands. And had a lot of fun. I was doing that on CHMR, and then we moved to Corner Brook, which is in central Newfoundland. And I took my show to Bay of Islands Radio in Corner Brook, and we started interviewing sort of local talent, people from the university, people from the business community kind of thing, and had a lot of fun with that. When we came back to St. John's, we started doing it on CHMR again with Mike. I had a co-host. Mark Galway was my co-host at the time, and every week we pretty much have a new guest from the community and talk about whatever they have going on. We did that for about a year, and then we got our own SOCAN license to play music. So we decided to kind of branch off to our own show, and now here we are down in the Hot for the Moment studios, high above Posey Row in downtown St. John's, Newfoundland. And we're doing our own SOCAN licensed podcast, The Hulk Caesar Show. So it's me and my co-host, Emily Malloy, who is a very local, very talented musician. She joined us on our show last year as a guest. And I put her to call for a new co-host when Mark wasn't available anymore, and she kind of asked if she could do it. And we've been having a great time interviewing all sorts of local guests from the community, lots of musicians and artists and business people and all sorts of things. And people come on the show and they play live music for us here in the studio. It's so amazing. So we've been having a lot of fun, and that's pretty much what we've been doing.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah, it's awesome, man. And your show is excellent. So
the Hulk Caesar Show on Spotify and everywhere else you get your podcasts. It's a great show. You guys do such a great job, and you've gone through so much. It's great to see, you know what I mean, through such a journey through cancer and beating that and coming out on the better end of that, and then right into COVID, which was probably, you know what I mean, one of the worst times I think most of us can remember. Yeah. And then
I was just getting out of bed. I finished my chemo in December. I did 6 months of chemo, and then I finished it in December of 2019. So by February, early March of 2020, I was just kind of feeling I can get up and I can go places and I can do things. And then COVID started. So I was
Get
really
back in your
used
house.
to the lockout by the time that happened.
But like you said, it was almost sort of a benefit in for lack of a better word, in your sense, because you wanted to fulfill your passion in radio and stuff like that. So it was a good opportunity to kind of get a hold of these kind of, not local, but like great Canadian art, content, great Canadian musicians, artists, and stuff like that, and have a little kind of conversation with them and stuff like that.
And everybody was so gracious. It was like such a positive experience. I don't think I talked to anybody who gave me any sort of attitude or was rushed. Like everybody was just so kind and so welcoming with the questions and their talk. It was such a positive experience.
Yeah, no, it was excellent, man. It's but yeah, and it's excellent to see like the variety on your show. Like, I mean, you guys even pull in like MPs and candidates running and all kinds of cool stuff. Like, it's very cool. It's interesting. It reminds me of to a certain degree like one of the old like VOCM shows or whatever. You know what I mean? Like that kind of thing sometimes, but in a like a new way, obviously. But it's funny. Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, it's kind of what we're aiming for. We're kind of like a community radio show, but on the internet. Like we're very guest focused. We don't really do a lot of promotion as such, and we're not really trying to get listeners as much as we're trying to get guests, and we want the guests to have a very positive experience, and we want them to leave thinking, those people were super cool. And when I talk to people, I'm going to say how cool those guys were. Right? So that's pretty much our goal, is to seem cool in the local community.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty much our
in the long run. I mean, I think that would be the greater achievement to have would be to have the guest have that certain experience where they want to say that was great and those guys were kind of cool, right? Or spread the word, or even if they just told their spouse at home, it'd be a great thing to have, like just to tell, what I mean, like these guys are great to talk to and stuff like that. So
well, I could talk about myself all day, but I'm so excited to talk about wrestling, so maybe we should get into it.
All right, so tonight we're gonna talk some old school wrestling. So we're gonna go back to the probably later '80s, '90s, early 2000s kind of attitude, pre-attitude, post-attitude era. And we're gonna have some fun. So it's gonna be a good laugh. We got some cool special treats rigged up here, so hopefully it all goes as planned, and we'll have a bit of fun here tonight. So off the bat, everybody, starting out, what got everybody into it? So I'll start off with the man in the room with me. I'll start off with Ryan. What got you into wrestling, man?
Me, for me personally, I think I had an older cousin, right? So my older cousin kind of grew up through the Hulk Hogan heyday, I guess you would say, right? So he was my godfather. His name is Trevor, and he actually later became a wrestler himself, and had some accolades. He was never in the WWE, but he had a few dark matches and stuff like that, and he had a few kind of tryouts and stuff like that at house shows and stuff like that. So he was a big Hulk Hogan fan, and he kind of inspired me to watch it. We would rent the VHS tapes at the a local convenience store, and we would for me, so kind of got me up to date with all the 80s stuff, right? The old Survivor Series, the old Royal Rumbles, and the old the old WrestleManias and stuff like that. So that's kind of where I got my introduction to wrestling and stuff like that. So it was an early age thing, and that's kind of where it all started, really.
Nice. So what about you, Caesar, my man?
Well, I have a similar story. I had an older cousin as well, and he was maybe 6 or 7 years older than me. And he had a Columbia House membership when he get his VHS tapes in the early 80s. And he had WrestleMania 1 and WrestleMania 2 on VHS. So whenever I'd go to their place, of course, I'd watch them. I can see that King Kong Bundy cover of WrestleMania 2. I can see it in my eyes now.
Great cover.
So I watched a lot of that. I used to watch Superstars on Saturday. I'm a bit older than you guys. I was born in '78. So I watched a lot of Superstars. My birthday actually was February the 5th. So as you can see here, February 5th, 1988 was a very big day. It was my 10th birthday, and I was watching Saturday night's main event when the two Hebners came out, and they were the twin brothers. And they screwed Hulk Hogan, and Andre the Giant took the belt and tried to give it to Ted DiBiase, and that prompted the WrestleMania 4 tournament that the Macho Man won. So that all happened on my birthday. I got to stay up late and watch it, and it was amazing. And I hated Hulk Hogan as a child. So it was fantastic for me. I loved Ted DiBiase.
That's wicked.
He was like I think he was one of the greatest heels, like Ted DiBiase. Like, you know what I mean?
Old school, yeah.
People to
Definitely
come
good
out of
old school heel.
the audience and like kiss his feet. You know what I mean? Like,
And
like later you would find out like
last time.
I think Rob Van Dam was actually a person who actually got to come out of the audience and come into the ring and do a thing.
Yeah.
I don't, if
He did the basketball, I think. Rob Van Dam did the basketball. One
yeah,
time,
it was
I
a
think.
basketball one. Okay, yeah. It was one of the things, but yeah, he used to just and his what was it? What would you call Virgil? His
his chancelier, his companion,
his,
his I don't want to use the S
driver,
word.
maybe I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. This is a guy. That's
His
just
guy. That was his guy,
That was
Virgil.
his guy.
Oh, classic.
Yeah, it's like I'm a wrestling fan, but I don't follow it. I don't feel like as much as you guys,
Yeah.
but I did follow it really hard in this era. But like my grandfather was a huge fan. Like he had like a room, like his little tiny TV room, his little 13-inch TV. That was like his space. But yeah, he religiously watched wrestling, and like he had like the old school war games would have like 3 cages, and it'd be
I love the
18
old school
dudes
war
or
games.
whatever, 25 dudes in a ring. That
Oh, yeah.
craziness, complete craziness for like 2.5 hours in this steel
Love it,
cage
yeah.
bananas. Yeah, that's the kind of stuff that got me into it. And then of course like the Bret Hart, Hulk Hogan era kind of thing. Like I was a big Bret Hart guy. I was a humongous Ultimate Warrior fan. I had like the shirts, the wallet. I wanted to be the Warrior kind of thing. And then I loved Macho Man promos. Like I loved hearing Macho Man.
That kind of just reminded me of a story. I was probably like 9 or something like that, and my 2 older brothers had some Crayola markers. They weren't. It was permanent.
Not as
permanent,
washable
but
as they are
wasn't-
now.
Yeah, it was. It stayed on for a really long time, but they painted on my face the Ultimate Warrior face paint.
Oh shit.
Yeah, I went. Yeah. I remember going
That's wicked.
to the neighbor's house, and they're just like, "Oh my god, like what?"
Oh,
have we
your
got
parents are gonna love
done?"
this one.
Yeah, I'm the Ultimate Warrior now. Yes.
That's super funny. That's super funny.
We got TBS very early in my life. We had, I grew up out around the Bay, and we had NTV and CBC obviously, and we had ASN from Halifax. Was a big station.
ASN was a wicked channel.
But one of the very early stations we got was TBS out of Atlanta. So we had lots of Braves games, and we had lots of WCWs. So I was a WCW guy. I was WWF in my early days till I was 10 or 11. But once we got TBS with Saturday Night's Main Event and the Clash of the Champions that were always on television, like free pay-per-views kind of thing, I shifted WCW big time.
Nice.
What year would that have been in WCW's?
That would have probably been like late 80s, early 90s, like 89, 90, I think, probably.
Okay. So
I think probably going into like the 1990 when Sting was kind of coming around and having those big matches with Flair.
Right. Okay. Were they on that like their soundstage era then with
That was the soundstage era. Yeah, that was way before Disney.
Yeah.
When Disney was the soundstage era, I guess. It was before that. It was back when they used to do like the really crappy stadium shows where they black out like 95% of the arena because it was all bums just in there because they could just, like, be warm.
Yeah. No. I don't remember like if having TBS per se. Like it's kind of like on and off throughout my childhood. I would say.
Yeah, TBS
And,
wasn't.
But I do remember like
thing.
at some points too, like watching like I don't know if it was like an early it was like NWA or if it was like early WCW. I'm not really sure, but like I have a home video.
Yeah, they blended pretty good.
Yeah, like I had a home video of me, and it was I think it was maybe my birthday or something like that or whatever, some holiday. But I had this new tracksuit on, Green Bay Packers suit, and Nan was wanting to see my tracksuit or whatever, right? So. And I was watching on the TV. You could hear the music and the people coming out. The entrance. It was NWA or WCW. I can't remember. I'll have to go back and double check. But
We'll pull that one out.
yeah,
Pull that out.
was,
That's wicked.
All these memories are just flowing back.
Yeah, that's what I was saying earlier. I was like, when we get going here
you
now,
just
a lot more
mention
stuff
that
will come out.
Did you just mention you're a Green Bay Packers fan? Is that what you said?
That was just the little tracksuit I had been given to me as a present.
Acceptable. That's acceptable then.
It never stuck. It
like
never
Just
stuck.
turns the feet off, and that's
Yeah,
it. No
no.
more Caesar.
It never stuck. No.
That's what
Not a huge football fan in general, to be honest, but
Yeah, I'm not a big football guy.
I'm a Bears fan, so I'm not a big huge
Oh.
football fan.
yeah, you're used to turning it off halfway through the game.
His first quarter sucked. So, guys, what was everybody's favorite? Say, like, we'll take it from like say late '80s, early '90s era kind of thing. So, like, who was everybody's favorite guys? Like, I was, like I was saying, I was into the Warrior, Bret Hart. Who was everybody else into at this point?
Yeah, I was a big Bruce Beefcake fan. Bruce, I love the Barber.
Nice.
This is actually what I'm going to show you here now is a collection of photos I did when I was learning to use Photoshop. It's Bruce Beefcake cuts presidential hair in caves. Here he is cutting Reagan's hair. Then he cuts Clinton's hair in a different cave. He also cuts Jimmy Carter's hair. And of course, Dwight cuts his hair. And he cuts Nixon's hair. So I was a big Brutus Beefcake fan. I like the strut.
That's what I get.
The strut that he did. I liked when he cut
what? Here we
Adrian
go.
Adonis's hair that
Here we
time.
go, right here.
There he is. There, look at him. There he is.
That's wicked.
So I was a big,
That's so funny.
I was a big fan of his. I was also a fan of the Hart Foundation. Those guys were with Jim the Anvil and Bret the
Jimmy.
Hitman Hart. Back when they were really evil guys. I love that stuff. Look, Jake Snake there. I love Jake as well.
Oh, yeah.
Jake Snake was an early favorite
and
too.
then Macho Man, of course. I love the Macho Man and Elizabeth. Macho Man was probably one of my favorite wrestlers I think of all time, and on Legendary promo, it's just totally totally legendary.
The cream of the crop, oh yeah. The cream will rise to the top, oh yeah.
I love it. That was probably
That's one of my favorite. That's on my list as favorite promos.
definitely
For
one of
sure.
them. I
For
think,
sure.
man, it's same for me, man. Early on, growing up too, the same thing. Like, I loved just Macho Man, Ultimate Warrior. You know what I mean? I loved,
Yeah.
But then, like later on, like getting in, Bret Hart. I think Bret Hart was, he was a Canadian. I was like, oh, it's
Yeah.
such a great thing. I loved the commercial, but I loved him putting the shades on the everyone when the kids like, oh man, I'd love to have the
Wholesome.
little
What a wholesome
shades
dude,
come on,
right?
right?
Yeah. Everybody go to wrestling hoping, hope Bret Hart's gonna put the sunglasses on me.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
man. There was that mystique. It could be me, right?
And a little bit in a sense too, like he was, compared to everyone else, he was a little bit of a smaller guy, even though he was, I think, maybe 6'2", maybe like 2 something. But he was smaller compared to the other guys in the WWF at the time and stuff like that. So I think it was kind of cool to see a smaller guy kind of overcome and be the champion, be the top guy kind of thing, like, right? So
Yeah.
I kind of felt proud of that, right? Like you see that picture of him in Lake Louise, I think, with him with all the denim on.
The full
Like, I think-
denim tux going.
Like, wouldn't you
He
just
redid that photo recently. I saw a photo a couple days ago of
Really?
him back at the same spot doing
Oh,
the
no
same
way.
pose.
Sick, eh?
That
what
is
a
cool.
Jim, what a
I didn't know he
Canadian
did that.
Jim he is. They should put him on a coin and just leave it there.
I know,
Sick.
right? The Canadian, he like just exudes the Canadian tuxedo with the denim, all denim the whole way down
Oh,
through.
yeah. If he wasn't wearing that, I would be just, you know what I mean? Like, it would be weird if he wasn't wearing it, kind of thing. That's how I feel about it.
But
Now I named all WWF talent, but obviously I was more of a WCW guy myself.
right,
So I had like Sting.
Stinger.
Sting was a big wrestler for me growing up, like the old school Surfer Sting, and with his face paint, and like when he was super young, and Flair was kind of like at that point we thought Flair was old. That was like 1991. Showed us he had a long way left to go.
Little
kind
did
of
we
thing,
know,
but
yeah.
Really loved Sting. Really loved, of course, Van Vader.
Big Van Vader.
Loved
Oh,
Van Vader.
yeah, yeah. Now we're
What a
talking.
beast,
Now we're
you know?
talking.
Big Van Vader.
Just an agile
so
guy.
cool.
You hear stories of Vader carrying that helmet around and having to like check it in at airports and stuff, and like hoping it shows up on the other end because you got to wear it in Atlanta that night. Kind of
That's
thing.
great.
Fantastic. Let me go back here. Yeah, so I loved WCW and WWF kind of in those days. I was kind of like torn between them, I think.
That's that picture of Big Van Vader there. He
That's
that,
not real.
That reminds me of like the first boss in Double Dragon 2, or right? Like I think when you
Bobo.
Yeah, it's like so when you go up the up the stairs, and
Yeah.
I think that kind of the first
Oh,
boss like
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
reminded me. As a kid, I always like, oh man, that boss. He looks like
That's Vader.
Vader.
And then you get to
He
the
looks
end
like
of the run,
Vader
and
to
that
me.
boss
Yeah.
of Bobo was there twice.
Loved it. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's
But
super funny.
later on too, like I think through like through the new through the old school, through the new generation, I think they called it, into like the Attitude Era. I think where we became, like for us personally, as me and Sam kind of came into our own, I guess, in with wrestling. The Attitude Era somewhat shaped us as kids. How did that? How did you feel as as the Attitude Era came into a full effect?
Yeah, I was I'd kind of gotten away from wrestling to some degree when I hit kind of like 12, 13, 14 kind of thing. I guess I kind of got back into it during the first Nitro when that kind of became, because of course I was TBS bound at that point. So me and Ted Turner were besties. And I wanted to watch what he was putting on there. So when the first Nitro came on, I kind of jumped back on board. So
Right. Okay.
and then obviously once the NWO kind of kicked off, it was
Damn.
it was to the races then, right?
Damn.
Yeah. So in terms of that, so like there was, I think, I mean, and like I'm not, like I say, I'm not an expert in wrestling, but I think a turning point for the whole thing was when Scott Hall and the boys screwed everybody over there, and then of course that was when NWO was kind of, or the Outsiders technically was born from that,
Well,
fuck the FOMO thing.
Well, it kind
So they
of
kind of transitioned from that, and then of course that I think caused the whole like kind of like badass era to kind of kick off from that point, I think. And like I said, I'm not an expert, but to me, doing a bit of research from the show and remember, of course, I'm like, oh man, I remember all this crap. Like you remember all these things again.
that was an epic.
Yeah, I think that was the initial transition for everybody. I think
those were the days where it was before like everyone knew everything. So like when you seen Scott Hall come down through the crowd and come over the railing, jump into the ring, and cut the promo, and he's just like, I know you know who I am. And it's like, I'm here to like just fuck shit up, right? Like, and he came out and
I
did
saw
that promo.
all that live on TV.
Really?
I saw Lex Luger come out the night after the WWE
At the mall?
pay-per-view
Yeah,
on the WCW. I saw that live. I saw Scott Hall come to the crowd live during the Alex Wright match. I saw Kev Nash come out during the Eric Bischoff interview for the first time. I was watching Bash at the Beach when this happened and Hogan came out, and it was unbelievable that Hulk Hogan was now the villain. And this is when I became a Hogan fan, because as I said, I hated Hulk Hogan when I was a kid.
How cool!
I loved Hollywood Hogan. Just loved it.
How
I love
fucking cool was that, dude? Like honestly, like
so cool.
But I think that
I
like watching that back, like I watched that like just literally like the other day, and it's like I think the announcers kind of spoiled it a little bit. You know what I mean? Like
yeah, Bobby
you know
Heenan.
you know what I mean? If you watch it back over, it's like the announcers kind of, I don't want to say botched it, but or whatever.
In retrospect, it seems
handled
that way.
differently.
But I tell you, watching it live, I never imagined it for a second.
yeah,
I don't
exactly,
imagine. I
right?
guess, yeah. And there's I found too, like, because this is still, you're still kind of caught up in the early mystique of wrestling too. Like, and you're a kid too, which I mean, you don't really necessarily always see it for what it truly is anyway, and which is a good thing, right?
Right.
So I think there's a lot of that in it too. And then when you kind of go back after, it's like watching childhood cartoons. Sometimes you're like, oh, it was so awesome, and then you see it and you're like, what the fuck just happened? Like,
And it's context.
That type
There
of
was
thing.
no
Totally
internet
context.
back then.
Exactly.
So there was no backstage. There was no marks, right? It
You
was
got to
just
see what
it
you
was
saw.
what you were fed, and
Right.
that was what it was.
Right. So yeah, that was a huge moment. But for me personally, that was like a moment that I didn't see live.
Yeah.
I didn't see like or I didn't watch any of the leading up to that Great American Bash. I didn't see any of those nitros or whatever what have you. Like I know
I've seen clips
And
of it
Friend
after,
was-
like during Nitro or whatever, like when they were, or like when TSN, because remember TSN used to, what's his name? Used to have the weekend
Landsberg.
Landsberg,
Michael
yeah,
Landsberg.
he had the
off the record.
off the record and stuff, and he would do like he did everything, like it was Kurt, I mean whatever, but he did a segment every week
You
too
get all the
on
wrestlers
wrestling
on that
and
show,
shit.
yeah.
So good too, and he was such a good commentator. Like he was so good, and then like he would bust that out. Like that used to be the best part of the week almost, because then you would get like a really good breakdown of, or you'd see things that you, like as we were a little bit younger, we didn't get to see. So you'd see he'd show you that clip to explain the background. So it was kind of like pre-YouTube tutorial or whatever, right? That was awesome. I was looking
I
at that.
think
Too. It was awesome.
I think in this moment here, where this is probably the first time that I looked at wrestling as, oh my God, is this real? What's happening? And it was this.
Oh,
with Marty
dude.
Jannetty through the window of the
Dude.
barber shop.
Dude, I'm
And
telling you.
I was watching that on a Saturday afternoon, and I could not believe what was happening.
That shook me.
awesome.
That shook me to
That's
the
awesome.
to the core.
That's awesome. Yeah, it did.
Oh,
yeah.
that shook me to the core. I wasn't aware. I wasn't privy to all the ins and outs of wrestling at this point. Those guys were best friends.
and they
And
did
he
that to
just
each
turned-
other.
They were just talking to Brutus, and they
Yeah.
were, you know what I mean.
couldn't
And he
believe it.
just came around
I couldn't believe it.
and he threw him
That was the best.
through
That was
the
awesome.
glass. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's crazy.
I mean, Shawn Michaels, he turned into a star after that.
Big time. It's
Yeah.
big time. And I look at like other moments that I think of as big moments in wrestling for like fantastic moments is like this one when Sting came down from the rafters for the first time.
Stinger.
It was unbelievable. We hadn't seen Sting for months. And then all of a sudden, you start seeing like these rumors of Sting up in the rafters. And then he comes down with the baseball bat. And it was like that changed WCW that day. It's unbelievable to watch it live. And then you look at something like even in the more of a current day, you look at when AJ came out at the
Oh,
Royal Rumble,
Royal Rumble.
maybe like 10 years ago or so.
Yeah.
That was unbelievable. I was watching that live, and I'd heard rumors that maybe AJ Styles is going to come out on WWE, but he hasn't been signed, so it's not going to happen. And then, bam, there he is. Right? It's moments
Oh,
like that
dude.
in wrestling, I think, that really like captivate your mind.
Yeah, that one was huge for me too. Another big one for me for in terms of Royal Rumble, surprise entrance. Just what was it, 5, 6, 7 years ago when Edge came back? You know what I mean? Like I don't think there's ever been a crowd that hyped and that loud. Like that was unbelievable.
Cool, yeah.
Like
I watched even like I went back
that
and
was
made sure I
unreal.
watched that,
I fucking loved when Edge returned.
and everybody was behind him too. Like there was a lot to that part of it and everything. It was awesome. Yeah, I agree. Like I said, I don't watch wrestling that much. I mean, I pay attention, but I don't watch it necessarily. But I watched and stuff for that. I was like, I gotta see that shit. Like that's
We'll be
unreal.
watching in January.
Oh, on Netflix,
because it's on Netflix now, and we're gonna be
Oh yeah,
maybe
So
we're gonna
that's
be
Hundy.
hyping
Oh, I'll
up
be
a little
I'll
bit.
be very much back
Library,
into it.
Uh,
I'll be very much back into watching
100%. I'll
fucking
be
Raw
getting
again.
Sam back into.
Oh, I'll be back
Yes,
into it.
dude.
I'll be back
I
into
used
it anyway.
He'll be into the cream of the
I
crop
lived-
wrestling here.
I lived in an RCMP neighborhood in Whitburn when I was a teenager,
Oh,
early teen, and one of the cops across the street had a satellite dish. So
Oh.
he'd get all the wrestling pay-per-views, and now and again he'd invite us over. So I saw WrestleMania 6 at his house when the Ultimate Warrior pinned Hulk Hogan on the pitcher's
Oh,
mound in
my
Skydome.
Goodness.
That's
Uh,
sick.
I saw Survivor Series when The Undertaker debuted. Like all these big events, it was like to see it on pay-per-view on a satellite dish was like
Wow.
you felt like royalty. It was
Yeah.
like something that doesn't happen every day.
Because for me personally, like those were stuff that I didn't see until they came out on VHS.
Oh, 100%.
Right?
Yeah, or
Yeah.
somebody else had it recorded or
Right.
whatever the thing was, like you never just kind of got it or whatever. You
Yeah.
couldn't just walk in and rent it necessarily even.
I think my cousin had a satellite dish later on, and we were watching like TNA pay per views and stuff like
Shit, I
that,
remember
like
that,
and WWE as well. But like we would watch like TNA pay per views as well.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
NWA was pretty
Watching the
good.
adult
Back then.
programming, but it's kind of like wavy.
Yeah.
No, yeah.
Well,
no.
the buy,
no.
If you knew the buys that I knew at least, and you might know a fella with one of those special cards, right? Remember those? You would get the card
Oh,
program
yeah,
and
yeah.
plug it into your
Yeah,
satellite.
yeah.
You get
We used to
all
run
the
those in the
channels.
back truck in
You would get,
Vancouver. Your card would need to be flashed, and you'd be like,
Yeah,
"Oh,
yeah,
it's like
yeah,
money
yeah.
falling from the sky. Your card needs to be flashed."
Oh man,
I love it.
what was they call it? Yeah.
That's super funny. I love that.
Chip card
Get your
program.
chip, get your chip program.
Yeah,
Unlock
your
all the
card
channels.
program.
It's so funny.
Direct
funny,
TV,
like, one of the
right?
programmers
Direct
used to,
TV.
like,
Make sure you got
fucking
Direct TV
everything.
and
Right. Oh
the
my
Playboy
God.
channel.
Everything.
It's so funny.
couple of those extras on the end.
Oh, guarantee you got to have a little Hustler Entertainment or a little bit of Playboy Channel. That's so
Well,
funny.
we still live high in the pirate seas. Don't
Hey.
forget.
Oh yeah,
So
man.
they're
Oh
just-
yeah.
You just
Oh
gotta
yeah.
grab it.
I use them by available. But that's true. Like,
That's
yeah,
true.
I like to, I remember going to my cousins as well, another cousin as well, and it was NWO versus NWO and WCW, or it was the first like pay per view where NWO like had their own single pay per view of their own, and
Yeah,
like they were like fully
sold
taking
out.
over. Yeah,
Oh yeah. NWO
they were like
versus
taking
whatever.
over. Like it was so good. Like,
NWO changed it. Like I say, I think the Outsiders originally started, and then because as it transitioned into NWO, I think that kicked off because like the WWF at the time had no other choice but to keep up kind of thing, and I think that the Hollywood Hogan persona, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall thing was fucking awesome. Like
oh,
complete like when that kicked off, like, and I was watching both of them at this point. Like I was watching both, but I definitely was very much more captivated by the WCW storyline at that point. And especially when they started bringing some people in, like they would have a match, and of course someone would pop out and surprise, it's whatever, and something would happen, and they would gain another member or whatever. Like that stuff was really cool. It was like watching a cartoon or something, like people getting superheroes or something, right?
Yeah.
But they were badasses. So then, of course, now you got the rise of the Stone Cold era and DX kind of thing, because that's really where that starts to get.
even to kind of back up a little bit before that, like WCW was doing their thing, and they were really good. Like
Yeah.
they were kind of, they took over, right? They took over all the ratings. They took over like all the, like they were the hot commodity, right? Like, but in a sense, Vince McMahon kind of had ECW and Paul Heyman kind of in their back pocket. Like they kind of had, they did their kind of a little bit of a cross promotion kind of early on in the Raw days. You kind of, if you remember that, they kind of did like a little small invasion.
Yeah,
or
they
whatever
did.
It was.
Yeah, I remember that.
And then, you know what I mean? Like that was early, probably mid 90s, like 95 ish or whatever like that. And so I think that like in terms of like needing that like more like kind of a shock value or whatever,
Edgy,
like they
more
kind of
edgy.
turned back, like, obviously ECW kind of went back and they were still doing their thing in Philly or whatever, and they were coming up and they were making huge noise or whatever like that. So when WWF needed to really throw some heat on things, they brought in kind of, you know what I mean, some of that flavor from what ECW was kind of doing, you know what I mean, a little bit in that sense where they, they were a little more extreme and, you know what I mean, a little more, grow, you know what I mean, like
the hardcore effect.
hardcore,
The hardcore
and
effect.
the
Yeah, we
women
didn't,
and the women.
We
and
didn't
the,
really get a lot of the hardcore wrestling when I was younger because we didn't get TNN, which I believe ECW was kind of featured on at the time.
Oh, okay.
So I saw a lot of that hardcore stuff a little bit later on. A lot of like the Sandman and Sabu and RVD and those kind of famous ECW matches. But when I think of kind of like hardcore and the hardcore era, I think of like Abdullah the Butcher. I think of like the early '90s when Abdullah was doing those Halloween Havocs.
He's an
and
OG.
They
He's
put him in the electric chair. Like that to me, that
What a
was kind of
legend.
more the hardcore stuff, like the early Cactus Jack,
Yes.
Mick Foley kind of stuff.
That's right.
That to me, that was hardcore wrestling. So
Yeah.
I saw Cactus Jack backdropped on concrete, and
Yes.
I don't care how many times you jump through a table that's on fire. If you get backdropped by Arn Anderson on concrete, that is the most painful thing that can possibly happen to you.
Oh man, that stuff was nuts. Like the bomb matches and like
He's
all
a pioneer.
Yeah, that stuff was
Mick
crazy.
Foley,
That stuff's crazy.
Cactus Jack, like he's a fucking pioneer. Like he's a
Yes,
you know,
yes.
I mean,
Mick Foley's probably my favorite wrestler of all time.
yeah,
in
he
reality.
really was a huge integral part of that whole Attitude Era.
I look at the Rock and Sock connection when I
Yes.
think of Mick Foley, and what a fantastic angle that was, and how well The Rock and Mankind were able to play off each other. Now, Mankind was so great at playing off other people that he played off Stone Cold so well.
Yeah.
He played off Kane so well. He played off The Undertaker so well. But the Rock and Sock connection was such a fantastic mixing that you never would have thought would have worked, but it worked so well. That's what wrestling's all about in a lot of ways. Is two misfits, you put them together, and it's just it shines golden sometimes.
Yeah, I like the odd couples. I will say that for sure. Like, there's also like Head and Al Snow, right? Like that's a really good shtick, really funny odd
What do you
couple.
want? Head. What do you want? Head.
What
So
does
good.
everybody want?
So good,
Yeah.
man. So funny.
What does
Yeah,
everybody
90s are crazy.
need?
Crazy.
Because
even like you remember that little thing Perry Saturn and Moppy had there.
yes. Oh yeah, I forgot
my
about it. And
Lord.
then what's
They
his
kind of buried
Do you
Perry
remember
Saturn,
when?
poor
Do
guy,
you remember when the Big Boss Man cooked the Big Show's dog
Yes.
and fed it to
fed
him.
him to him?
Yes, I do,
And then,
yeah.
and then followed the Big Show's father's funeral and knocked the casket off the car.
Yes, man. Fucking dragged him along, pulled him out the car, and then Big Show's on the fucking casket, dragging behind, and oh my god, chaos ensues.
Oh, fuck.
Just
That
chaos,
would have
man.
been
I
really
wish we had
emotionally
that clip.
tasking for the Big Show. I
Can
think,
you
know,
imagine,
like,
man, being towed
no one
behind a
wants to see.
hearse?
No one wants to see the Big Boss Man attacking their father's casket. No one
That
wants
was
to see that.
Oh.
Cooking your dog?
Craziness, man. Craziness.
That was
That era
was that
was
crossing
nuts,
the
man.
line? Was that crossing the line or what?
Back then, man, I don't know. There's because that's so. Like I was watching a couple
Was
of
there a line?
couple different. I don't know.
There was
if there
no
was,
line.
man. So comparing that to like now, all right. Of course, like I think like as an outsider, because I'm not like a humongous fan, right? So like to me, like nothing compares to that era. Like the stuff that they got away with, the stuff that they did. I don't think that they would get away with that shit now. Like it would not fly, like in any capacity. Like, and not to say that the wrestling storylines are bad, not because they are good, but they're very story driven versus kind of like this gimmicky stuff and these crazy outrageous moments and stuff like that or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, I think of the wacky stuff in the '90s, and some of the things I got here. I got like Doink. Obviously, Doink was a pretty wild kind of
Love that.
view of things. And then we had, of course,
Gobbledygooker.
which is one of the most. I saw this happen live on pay-per-view at
Well.
Strand in the Avalon Mall. My dad once in a while would drive us into St. John's to go to the Strand and watch pay-per-views. I don't remember the Strand. It was a restaurant bar in the Avalon Mall. And so we were there watching this Survivor Series.
Wow.
And what came out of this egg? But of course, the Gobbledygooker, who immediately went to the ring and danced with Mean Gene Okerlund. That's probably the height of ridiculousness. But
That
Papa
was,
Shango, of course.
Papa Shango
he
was
was
That
bad.
was also the same debut of The Undertaker, was it not?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think so. At the same time on that Survivor Series,
Yes.
Yeah.
Papa Shango later came back and tortured your hero, who I also hated, the Ultimate Warrior.
Yeah, he
Oh,
did.
And
Yeah.
made the black
He-
goo fall from his head.
Oh,
Yes, man. He was
Put a
cursed.
hex on
He
him.
had the curse, the
He
hex
put
or
a
whatever. yeah.
hex on him.
Yeah, hex on
Yeah,
him.
that's right.
So funny, man. Right? Like holy shit.
Oh man.
Chaos. But it was I found it earlier, like I said, there was this kind of like just before the Attitude Era. It was just like this peak.
Yeah.
Like the wrestlers were superheroes, almost like they were
Well-
too far, like just so big. Their personalities, everything was so big. The FOMO was so big at that point, right?
And for me, like The Undertaker, like when he
Taker showing
like
up
you
was
said,
a different-
he debuted at that at the Gobbledygooker
Yeah.
Survivor Series, and
1990, I believe it was.
he
The
had
1990
a-
Survivor Series.
I mean,
Or 91, one of those two.
yes, just the aura around him, like you almost believe it. Like I'm 6 years old at this time, like six,
Yeah,
7 years
100%
old.
right.
Like I'm watching, like this is real. Like I'm totally invested in whatever I'm seeing, like on these tapes. Like I'm VHS. Like I'm 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 years old, right? Like trying to catch up on all this this golden era of
Yeah, man.
WWE and
Oh,
wrestling
yeah.
for sure,
And-
right?
There was
That-
no Paul Bearer then. It was all, I love you.
Yes,
I'm
that
Brother
was-
Love. Brother Love
Wasn't
was
it-
the Undertaker's manager.
Such
Oh,
a
yeah.
weird fit.
I forgot about that.
Such a weird fit.
He
That's a weird
loves you.
He loves you. I forgot about all that.
So is that Bruce Pritchard, right?
As Bruce Pritchard, that's correct.
That's right. Yeah.
That's savage.
Pretty
Bruce
good role,
Pritchard.
though, Brucey.
I love you.
I forgot all about that. Completely forgot
The
about
red
that.
of the beat.
That's super fucking funny. That's really funny.
But,
So- I got a couple of my like I said, my era is kind of would definitely be kind of, mid to late 90s.
Oh, it was like
Leading into-
1995 forward.
Leading into
more-
that Attitude Era, baby. So, like, for me, like, I remember, like, when, for me, like, one of my most, like, memorable moments is, like, when Stone Cold came out on the Zamboni. And then, like, clothesline Vince McMahon off the top, like, coming off the top of the Zamboni. Like, that was probably easily
savage moment.
one
Savage
of my
moment.
top moments.
I kind of went with the video games. Video games were a huge influence for me when it came to wrestling. And when WWF video games were popular, I watched WWF. And when WCW games were popular, I watched WCW. So I'll just show you a little bit here of
Here we go.
what I'm talking about. Like I kind of
Yeah.
started
Oh,
back in the day
yeah.
Oh, man.
with NES Pro Wrestling.
So
I
good.
played this game like you wouldn't believe all day long, every day. It was like the most fantastic game of all time. And then we went to more of a WrestleMania.
Oh,
You see
yeah.
Hulk Hogan there doing his little dance. Is funny. Let's just let that load again because it's so
Million
funny
Dollar
when he
Man,
walks
yeah.
down. He runs up the ropes here, and when he runs down, he looks so funny. I played the shit out of that game.
Yeah.
You wouldn't believe
That's
how many
wicked.
hours I dumped into that game. And then we got King of the Ring.
Now this
on
is one I
Nintendo,
played a
which
lot.
was-
I played the shit out of that one. That's one I played a lot.
This was advanced compared to WrestleMania. I mean, look at him run off the ropes like that, right? The Mountie. I mean, he's the Mountie. That's the law right there. Then we went into a Super Nintendo. I went to the drama festival in Bay Roberts one year, and I was billeted out to a house, and the house had a Super Nintendo. So I went to the local convenience store and rented SNES Royal Rumble, and I stayed home pretty much the whole weekend that I was there and played Nintendo. And this is the game that I played. So that game was
Nice.
like a big upgrade. Then, of course, we go to like
Oh,
WCW World
yeah.
Tour. Here we see Kevin Nash giving Chris Benoit possibly homicidal injuries to his head.
Oh, that's the most
Yeah.
brutal
That's the
powerbomb
one.
ever.
I think that's the one that put him over the top.
Yeah, So that game, when that game came out, that
Revenge.
was,
now
that's kinda where I
WCW
was-
versus NWO Revenge. Now that's an all-time greatest fucking NWO
There it is.
Yeah,
Here,
64
here's the
game of all
commercial
time.
for it.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, pop
Put
it
it
up.
back.
Put on the
I
big
played-
screen here.
I played that game like crazy.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
we
Oh,
played that game like nuts. And that was the first one where you could make in Revenge you couldn't make your own wrestlers, but in World Tour you could make your own wrestlers, but in Revenge you could. And that's where it really kind of kicked off. And then of course it went to the WWF games,
No
WrestleMania
mercy.
2000, and then No Mercy.
Yeah.
And those games were amazing. Like we had a Super Nintendo at our apartment in St. John's, 4 controllers, always somebody sitting at a controller playing wrestling. We all had our own wrestlers we made up. They had their own backstories. We had our own stables. We had our own managers. Like it was
Oh yeah, we had
crazy.
a lot going on with this. Started with Raw.
And you
for
look
us,
at
we got
now-
Megan's Raw.
right. Look at this now. This is wrestling now. I mean, you could barely tell it from
Holy moly.
from television compared to this. Is what we started with.
That's
Yeah, it's
ins-
nuts.
that's such a crazy jump.
Nuts.
Yeah. I know getting like
Crazy.
when I first got a PlayStation 1 and getting WWF or
Raw.
WWF Warzone or
Raw was the first
Yeah,
one I got.
Warzone or Here Comes the Pain.
Warzone or whatever it was.
Oh yeah, Warzone is the first one, not Raw. Yeah, because it would have been Warzone, not Raw. Yeah.
My buddy had Warzone. Let's go play it. And,
Stone Cold.
that
cover.
was, at the time, it was mind blowing.
with the
Totally mind blowing.
Because you could make. Remember, you
The
could
Rock
make.
looks like Cuba Gooding Jr.
It does, yeah. Because you could make like Dude Love and Cactus Jack. Like you could make those characters, and they
Yeah.
would like unlock or whatever. Like it would
Yeah.
basically be their
Yeah.
characters and stuff like that.
so good.
Yeah, we played that one
Amazing.
at one of our buddies' house a lot. That was probably the reason I got a PlayStation. Now that I say it, because we used to play it so much, I was like, well, I got to get better at it. So I was like, get me one in for Christmas with Warzone. That's so funny. Those games were classic though, like
Yeah.
especially like the N64 PlayStation era, because like they took a big jump from the previous era kind of thing. Like it had 3D, you could walk around, and you had all the finishers, and they looked cool, and yeah, it was sick.
Oh yeah, and you could do the 4-player match, like
Yeah.
elimination.
Get the
It was
multi-tap
It was like
going.
playing Bond but wrestling. Between 007 and Revenge or WrestleMania 2000, whichever one you're on, kind of thing. Those two Super Nintendo game or N64 games were nonstop.
Yeah.
It's like playing Bond. No one can be Odd Job. No one can hang out in the bathroom. No one can hang out in the corner of that center room. We got lots of rules. We got a cardboard cutout that goes on the screen so
Yes,
you
sir.
can't see
Yeah,
the
yeah,
person
yeah.
in line.
Don't even
Like,
We're splitting the screen,
old
boys.
school video game.
Yeah. Don't look at my screen.
Don't look at
I
the
think
Stop
if
looking
you
at
get
the
the
screen.
wrestling
Stop looking at the
magazines, like
screen.
when I was young, wrestling magazines were super huge. Like I had a subscription to WWF magazine.
Oh yeah.
Used to come every week, and it was like
Do you still have those?
so important. And you see all the kind of things you weren't really used to seeing in them. And then, of course, the PWI Top 500. We get that every year when it came out. See who was in the top 500 of wrestlers from like 1986 maybe to like 1995 maybe. I had every episode of every issue of that, and you'd see all the cool ads in wrestling magazines, like for the video games, or for this one was the one I really loved. You see like the old school LJN
yeah.
kind of
The
rubber
LJ.
wrestlers. You think, oh, I don't have that one. I don't have that one. I don't have that one.
That's the thing. I had 2 older brothers, so I had all the fucking LJNs, and then I got into like that was kind of a part of my wrestling kind of introduction as well, like having all these toys and 2 older brothers who loved wrestling and stuff like that too, and stuff like. So I loved in the ring, the little blue ring. I had a cousin once who put his heel right through the center of the frickin' ring one time. I had to get a new one.
Had to get a new ring, but
I was so pissed.
and that's like
Where's
those.
the big show?
What were those little wrestler dudes called? You know the guys I'm talking about. The little dudes you could slam on the ground and stuff. Whatever.
Wrestling buddies.
Wrestling buddies or whatever they were. Yeah. Everybody had one of
The
them.
Warrior Hogan and Jake the Snake Roberts.
Oh yeah, had
$1 Million
a
Man.
hole behind the head from giving them power bombs flat out, right?
$1 Million Man.
It's so funny.
I had this alien stuffy that my dad had won at the regatta one year. It was like 4 feet tall. I used to have it on my bed, and I'd get up on the bed rail and kind of jump off and give it the Randy Savage elbow.
Ooh yeah. Oh,
Ooh,
brother. It's so funny, man.
In that near corner, yeah.
So, what do you think of like when Vince McMahon and WWE bought WCW, and
Well, I remember that
did you watch
very,
that
very
episode when
clearly.
he came on like at the
I
first?
did, and more than watching the episode, at the time I was big into eWrestling.com, which was one of the first kind of real backstage wrestling websites of the early internet, and this was kind of their heyday, like late 90s, early 2000s. So I had seen rumors early in the day on the website that something huge was going to happen on WCW tonight. And then as the afternoon came, there started to be rumors that Vince McMahon is going to do something with it. So we tuned in to see what was happening and saw live as Vince kind of took over the video and announced that he owned WCW now. And it was like,
I bought my competition. Oh man,
what a
dude.
weird dude.
I wish I had seen that live. I'm jealous that you did. And you
Saw that live. I watched the Raw when Benoit, they did the Benoit show, and I'd read on the internet before the show even started that something wasn't right with that, and that it wasn't the whole story. And by the time Raw started and they were doing the benefit show, me and my cousin were talking about how Benoit killed his family, and this is not what they should be doing.
And this is crazy.
I got a couple of rare relics here. Old. I don't. Maybe I shouldn't even show this, but I guess.
Oh, whatever. It's podcast. Let it rip.
Benoit.
Couple pennies.
Hard Knocks.
Yeah.
This was actually the backlash where Randy Orton and Mick Foley had that great hardcore match for the Intercontinental title. And at Backlash in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. This was 1 month after I moved to Grand Prairie, so that's why I bought it. I was like, oh man, I'm sorry I missed out on this show and stuff like that. So anyway, we're gonna get on Chris Benoit. We don't want to get on Chris Benoit.
Obviously, what happened was horrible, and there's no justifying anything in there. But as far as pure wrestling ability, one of the best wrestlers who ever lived.
Yes.
Super talented wrestler, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, yeah.
Oh, I think so. So moving off of that, so like, we'll move away from Chris Benoit.
Moving off.
Go back to.
That's what we keep trying to do, right?
We're moving off.
Moving on to that. But what is? Let's go back to the hardcore thing again too. So like, because I think because of course in the end it all got acquired by WWE and whatever. But the ECW thing, I think, because everybody kind of started putting eyes on that, I think changed wrestling in that era as well. Because I think it was like a perfect storm
Yes.
situation, right?
Yes.
Like you had like the rise of the kind of like the badass character kind of thing versus the wholesome wrestler kind of thing. Because that kind of era faded, it seemed like everybody was for heels. What's everybody's opinion on on the rise of the hardcore era kind of thing? Like it's the attitude era, but it's technically there's also that hardcore aspect to all that. So
Yeah,
we'll
we
throw
used to
this.
hear a lot about it back in the day. Like I said, we didn't really get a lot of it on television, but we hear a lot about the matches on the dirt sheets and the early internet kind of thing. Uh, it had a huge impact. I think ECW was a huge kind of training ground for a lot of guys. Like you look at a guy like Shane Douglas, who had no success whatsoever really in WCW, and got a mouthpiece in ECW and really brought it. Stone Cold Steve Austin, obviously, before he was Stone Cold. I was a huge Stunning Steve Austin fan back in the day. I love the Hollywood Blondes. Him and what's his
Brian
name?
Pillman. Brian Pillman.
Sorry?
Pillman.
Brian Pillman, yeah, him and Flying Brian Pillman, of course. I love those guys. I loved Steve Austin back then. And when we heard that he was kind of in ECW doing crazy stuff, we're like, oh. And then we saw him, of course, as the ringmaster and eventually Stone Cold Steve Austin, the Sandman. And we heard lots about the Sandman and his epic kind of entrances. I think ECW really kind of brought popular music back into the forefront of wrestling. I think you look at the 80s and wrestling and music were so intertwined. You look at like really when it came to like WrestleMania and Cyndi Lauper and the Rock and Wrestling connection, the cartoon, music and wrestling were really kind of connected. And it kind of got away from that. And I think ECW kind of brought that back with a lot of their entrance music and whether they were licensed or not, but they're playing it nonetheless.
That's right. Yeah.
So I think like when you watch a lot of the ECW videos on the WWE network, you don't see that anymore, and I think it takes away from the presentation of the overall product. But it was certainly Paul Heyman. I mean, a genius. I can remember seeing pictures of Paul Heyman in wrestling magazines in the '80s with his gigantic cell phone and just being like the weird little guy kind of thing. And then you look at how much he built and how much turmoil and unpaid checks he kind of went through to get to where he is now, where I would think he's probably the most trusted name in wrestling. I think like there's few people that people trust in character more than Paul Heyman. And it says a lot for what he built at ECW and the reputation that he built just on pure mic skills, really, that really brought ECW to where it is and what it became.
He's definitely a living legend, I think.
Oh,
personally.
for sure, yeah.
We absolutely seen the rise of ECW, and even going back before that, like you said, I'm pretty sure he was 14, 15 years old, and he was a photographer out, out around the ring, and he was taking photos and trying to wheel and deal, and he was trying to get himself backstage and trying to just meet and greet and make connections and try to meet people and eventually worked himself right into the business and kind of.
I look at him, he's managed what I would consider three of the top wrestlers of the past 20 years: Brock Lesnar, CM Punk, Roman Reigns, right?
Yeah. I mean, even his later work, with those three guys has been absolutely Hall of Fame worthy in its own right? But like his whole life has been wrestling. And his whole life has been revolutionary. Like making ECW coming up. Like I said, he had that connection with WWF at the time as well and stuff like that, and he kind of, I'm pretty sure they used Vince McMahon to kind of pay some bills to kind of keep him afloat for a little while and stuff like that as well.
I think Paul did a lot of creative accounting to try to keep things afloat.
Yeah, but I mean, it was revolutionary. You know what I mean? Like you said, you mentioned Shane Douglas, and when he won that NWA title, and he made the big speech after, and probably one of the greatest promos ever. Like he mentioned all these great wrestlers and all these great people of the past and all these people who built up this title to what it was, and all these great title holders. And he said all these guys, and they can all kiss my ass. And he threw down that NWA title, and he was going to be the new ECW champion at that point, right? This was the kind of like the birth of ECW.
Yeah, because that was the NWA championship, I believe, until that night.
It was like the Eastern something whatever, but it was the NWA, and he mentioned all these guys, and he said all these guys can just kiss my ass, and him and Paul Heyman were going to start this new company, and it was.
I think of guys, you talk about kind of reinventing yourself like Shane Douglas did, and I think of guys who have reinvented themselves, and there's no two better examples than Buff the Stuff,
Big
Papa Pump.
That's sick.
Those two guys, I loved them.
Buff,
I love Scott Steiner. Scott Steiner, one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. I loved the Steiner brothers when I was younger, and I loved Big Papa Pump with that gold kind of that the thing he used to wear over his head, like the chain,
the little chain link,
and then Buff the Stuff. I mean, he's Buff and he's the stuff. I know he gets a little hard time for all the Judy Bagwell on a pole stuff that came later on, but in the early WCW NWO days, there was nothing like Buff and Big Papa Pump. I mean, they were amazing together.
Oh man, holler if you hear me, Scott Steiner, baby.
Holler if you hear me.
No, he's good.
Steiner Matt.
It's great.
Is there a better promo than Steiner Math? If there is, it's
Steiner Math. Do you have that queued up? Can we
queue
queue up Steiner Math here? We gotta keep it rolling until we can get
you keep talking. I'll
Steiner Math rolled up. But it's great to see. It's great to see.
You look at Steiner. Steiner had a great career in WCW, and then he went to TNA and fought and feuded with Samoa Joe. And is there any funnier stuff than him making fun of Samoa Joe constantly in the ring? Like, it's just hilarious.
I mean,
he's like, and then now you look at Braun, who's Rick Steiner's son, and what a brute he is.
Man, great.
Where's that Steiner gear?
Oh my goodness!
Three-way for the TNA heavyweight title.
Oh, here we go.
Here we go.
Kurt Angle and Samoa Joe.
Beat me, and then you add Kurt Angle to the mix. Your chances of winning drastically go down. See, the three-way at Sacrifice, you got a 33 1/3 chance of winning. But I got a 66 2/3 chance of winning because Kurt Angle knows he can't beat me, and he's not even going to try. So, Samoa Joe, you take your 33 1/3 chance minus my 25% chance, and you got an 8 1/3 chance of winning at Sacrifice. But then you take my 75% chance of winning if we used to go one-on-one, and then add 66 2/3%. I got 141 2/3 chance of winning at Sacrifice. See, Joe, the numbers don't lie, and they spell disaster for you.
Holy cow.
It's pretty wild time. It's pretty wild time once you get away with the television. Pretty wild.
Not, I mean, it's good. I think they came a long way. I think what was it? They still had the Divas Championship at the time, and then they had a WrestleMania. I kind of fell off of professional wrestling over a time of probably, say, I don't know, 2008 to 2014. I'm not sure.
That's when I kind of fell out of
whatever.
Pretty dead era. Pretty dead time.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the year was exactly, but it was the WrestleMania where they introduced the WWE Women's Championship as it was. It wasn't a Divas Championship anymore. And they had these kind of new female kind of wrestlers who were great talents. Like they had the Charlotte Flair, who's Ric Flair's daughter at that time. They had Sasha Banks, Becky Lynch,
Suka,
Bailey, Asuka. They had or whatever. They have so many great people, great stuff coming up through like NXT and stuff like that. Right, NXT is a great place where they all came up through, and they introduced the WWE Women's Championship. I think that totally changed the game.
I think in the 90s there was a real push to put hot women in the ring, no matter what they could do. Just kind of put them in the ring and make them hot. I think we've certainly advanced a long way since then. I think the women's wrestling in their best of matches can give the men's wrestling a true run for its money.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
I
especially
think
now for sure.
They still kind of suffer, I think, from the she's hot, put her in there,
Yeah.
see what she can do, which leads to some sloppy matches sometimes. I think there's still some room to play. But I think that the advances from you look at the 80s with like Rockin' Robin Williams and Medusa and Sherry Martel. I mean, those were hard women who fought hard and wrestled old school backdrop wrestling.
Luna Vachon.
And then, right?
Oh yeah.
And then you got into the 90s when it was more like say broad panties kind of matches, and it sort of digressed a lot of the way. But I mean, it was good for ratings, I guess, but it wasn't really necessarily good for women's wrestling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
that was
now
kinda,
I think it's definitely back on track. I mean, I watched that War Games a few weeks ago.
Oh yeah, yeah, that was good
And
actually.
and they had the women's War Games match kicked off the event, and certainly there was some sloppy moves in there to some degree. I mean, there's going to be when you got 6 to 8 whatever people there was in the ring, but I thought it was fantastic. What's her name? The woman who was really the really buff woman who's really big. What's her name?
Rhea? Is it
No, not really. Like the bigger woman. I forget what her name is. She's like
bigger woman.
people say she's kind
Nia
of
Jax?
sloppy in the
Nia
ring
Jax?
more, but
I know who you're
I
talking
thought
about.
she looked fantastic. Like she looks like a beast, right? Like she looked like Brock compared to the other women, which I think is
I'm not sure.
is really good for women's wrestling. Like it's always good to have an Andre, to have a Brock, to have something like that. That's like the beast kind of wrestler.
Yeah, you
So
gotta have that.
I think they're in a good spot right now.
Yeah, no, they've come a long way. Like it's a you know, like I said, we grew up through in our teenage years through the brown panties matches, and it was just kind of
Yeah.
filler.
Which
lot
I
of
think,
filler
I mean,
stuff.
it fit with that era, I think, too, as weird as it sounds. But, like, I mean, growing up, like,
It was the
you had,
extreme.
like, everybody, for the most part, if it wasn't you that had a lady in a bikini on your wall, it was like, your dad had to count. You know what I mean? Like, it was kind of just how it was. So I think it was, like, you got to have the Bud Girls or whatever type thing. You had to
we're a
have
pinup
you had to have
generation,
that.
But it was
Yeah, it's the last of that pent-up
Yeah.
generation or whatever, right? So it's kind of, it was interesting that way. But I think towards the end of like the Divas era, of course, then you kind of seen like Trish and China and everybody kind of step up, and it did become wrestling. And I mean, some of those matches at that point were getting really good, like the hardcore kind of matches and stuff like that looked really good. They still had like this, Sable and this type of stuff happening, but they did have some good matches. Like Jacqueline was really good. Like even
you look at China. I mean,
Yeah.
what a interesting person China was as far as wrestling goes.
and to
like
go in with
such
DX, right? Like that was an interesting
Yeah.
dynamic, right?
and she kind of crossed
yeah,
over
such
into men's wrestling as well, right?
100%, yeah.
Her and Chris Jericho
Yeah.
had a good feud there
Yeah.
for a little while.
yeah.
Yeah, that was really
Yeah.
good, actually. Yeah,
See, her and Val went toe to toe a couple times, I think.
Yeah.
Val,
Yeah.
I mean, like that type of that character, Val Venus. Yeah, he ain't flying. He ain't going. He ain't going
No.
over today.
that's what I mean. Like you
No.
just wouldn't get away with this cool. We call it cool stuff,
But
I
at
don't
the
know if
time, like you
cool
said,
stuff or
it was that little bit of that extreme hardcore era.
Yeah.
In a sense.
and it
of-
pushed in all directions, right? It wasn't
Everything.
just
So
getting smashed with
It was the
stuff.
MTV era. It was Baywatch.
It was Howard
you know,
Stern.
the
It was
whole thing.
Howard
Everything
Stern.
like
It
that,
was
you
the
know?
birth of the internet. It was
Yeah, 100%.
It was all this extreme X Games stuff. Like it was anything you can push the envelope in doing.
Yeah.
Anytime you can use an X as the opening letter
Yeah.
of something, you're doing pretty
Yeah,
good.
if you could put an
these
X or a Z in front or behind it, you
Yeah,
were living life.
definitely.
Exactly.
It was the '90s, good '90s.
The
But
90s.
it's true. Like it's true. Like that's the one thing that like, especially like going back now because I haven't really gone thoroughly back through kind of like as a history of all the wrestling and stuff like that, and then kind of like arriving at the Divas era was like, man, this shit would not fly. But then kind of researching, getting to the end, it was like, okay, here's the transition point where it takes off, and now like I mean like a lot of the women's matches are really, really well done. A lot of people look forward to them. Like they're a huge part of the storyline now. And they look really good. Like the matches
legitimate
are
now.
good.
They
Yeah, it's super
legitimize it by letting them get out there and wrestle as opposed to go out there and pose, right?
100%.
And I mean, male wrestling went through the same thing in the mid '80s, the late late 80s, it was all pose wrestling.
Yeah.
You know, it was all Hogan get out there and pose, Macho Man get out there and pose, Warrior get out there and pose. And it was when guys like CM Punk came in and the Shield, and even going back to like Bret Hart and those guys kind of started it. But in the mid to late Cena kind of eras, like guys who could wrestle as well as be kind of buff posers. And I think it changed for men and women wrestling, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, you're not going to be able to attract people watching these things. You know, if these people on screen don't have any talent in what they're doing, they need to actually be able to move and you know, perform, you know, an act in a story, or keep people captivated in what they're doing. Right? They don't need to be. People don't want to watch pose offs no more. People want to watch people perform and do, you know what I mean. So like, do you watch any like AEW and any newer kind of stuff like that going on, or?
I don't necessarily watch a lot of it. I keep track of. I've always been more of a business of the wrestling fan than television of the wrestling fan in the later era, like in the last since the 2000s, pretty much. I've really followed the backstage news and what's going on, and didn't really watch the program so much. The last couple of years, I've kind of got back into watching the program a little bit of AEW, a little bit of WWF, but I'm well aware of what's happening in the shows. But I don't necessarily. I live in Newfoundland. Everything comes on late here. You know,
Yeah.
I used to live in Vancouver, where Sunday Night Football came on at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and it ended at 8 when you went to bed. And now Sunday Night Football doesn't come on until 9:30 at night, and I normally go to bed like a quarter after 9, and wrestling comes on late. So I don't necessarily see a lot of things that happen in Newfoundland anymore. I tend to watch the compressed versions of things in the morning. But I'm definitely aware of the talent that's out there. Like a big fan of Hangman Page, big fan of Dolph. I forget what Dolph's name is now, but whatever Dolph Ziggler became, he's been really heating it up on the indie scene.
Nick Namath.
I was always a big fan. Sorry, was that
Nick Namath.
Nick Naismith?
Nick Namath.
Yeah, Nick Namath. That's right. Yeah. I was always kind of a big CM Punk fan to some degree,
Yeah.
so I'm really pleased with Punk coming back, and I liked all the craziness that happened in AEW when he left. I think that's exactly what Punk's all about, and it fit perfectly.
Yeah.
And then for him to come back in WWE was like, I think that was amazing. I was a big Bray Wyatt fan when Bray was on the go. Loved what he was doing, and interested in what his brother's doing now, and then what their family's kind of the new Wyatt family. I think there's a lot of positive things happening in wrestling now. I think it definitely benefits from having a secondary federation that's not WWE controlled like AEW. I think Tony Khan has endless money pretty much, so it's kind of like a new Turner to some degree. But we'll see how it goes, I guess. But it's always good for wrestling, I think, when there's 2 or 3 federations out there kind of pulling talent.
Yeah, you need a little bit of competition to kind of keep people on their toes, right? So
I think so. I think AEW does a good job of that, really, because like they've kind of took a lot of cues from the Attitude Era. I feel like in the last 5 years or whatever kind of thing, especially to the build up now. It's kind of it's kind of like a a redo of that in the modern time kind of thing. So it's been really good.
Well, you look at how when they started, kind of with being the elite videos that Cody and the Young Bloods were making, and how that kind of grew into AEW. It was very organic, I think, in a lot of ways, which I think really benefited overall how people looked at it. Cody obviously is a superstar. He's a superstar now in WWE, but he always had that in him. Obviously, he's Road and the Road family, obviously big wrestling superstars, but now he's really shining, and I think he shined in AEW and kind of put himself apart from the Bucks and the Hangman and those people. And we can see now in WWE why, because they've been able to make him such a huge superstar. So hopefully AEW will be able to kind of build a few of their own superstars in that way and keep it going.
Yeah, I don't mind a little bit of healthy competition. You need something to keep people going. I mean, and it's okay to have a different flavor to watch. It's good to watch both, right? It's good to watch. There's a lot of people who watch one or the other or shit on one or the other. You know what I mean? It's just like, hey, it's fine the way it is. Just if
Yeah.
you don't like it, you don't have to watch
I
it.
always
but,
loved them both. You know, in the '90s, I'd
Yeah.
be watching Raw, I'd be watching Nitro. You know, switching back and forth.
Oh,
We'd watch
100%.
SmackDown, we'd watching Thunder. They're on the same time, so it was very. I grew up in a very competitive wrestling environment, so it was always natural for me to watch both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, people in AEW are kind of newer and they're going to build themselves up and stuff like that. So maybe someday we'll see some of them go to WWE. And I know that's like kind of taboo for like people. It's like, it is what it is. Like, it's just business, right? And if they
Gotta get
did
that bag,
it-
man. You gotta get that bag.
That's
I think
right.
that'd be great. I don't know. Like, I don't know. Just,
I like it, and I think it comes from like what you're saying, Caesar, is it's coming through the era of where it was a real competition for WWF and WCW. You know what I mean? Like that was a real thing. Like, and I mean, I was a super fan of both, and there was points where like I was a bigger fan of whichever one piqued my interest at the time. But you know, it was super competitive, and it wasn't just behind the scenes. Like it was very vocal that you know, like they would come and be like, "Hey, you know, WCW sucks. We're better." You know, like they would blatantly say that stuff, kind of thing, and it made for
You know, I was watching
competition. It was awesome.
WCW the night when Tony Schiavone did the famous "We here tonight on WWF." Mankind, former Cactus Jack, is going to win the WWF Championship.
Mm.
That should put a lot of butt in the
Yeah,
seats in the butt. And like I switched over myself then to see what was happening. Like that was probably the first time in months that I switched from Nitro to Raw.
Yeah, yeah. There was a good like NWO really, you know, turned it over. But I mean, Steve Austin too was like that whole thing because you had Steve Austin and you had DX at the same time, which was like silly. And then of course like the rise of The Rock in between all this and the Taker stuff and the Mankind stuff, because that was kind of like you had two angles. You had this like kind of goth dark angle where it was like, you know, Mankind and Taker and that kind of side of it. Then you had DX kind of doing fucking craziness stuff over here. And then you had like the feud between Austin and Vince, you know, like that was three big storylines. And then they would kind of touch each other here and there, right? Like you see these odd couples thing, or like they would have to face off in a pay-per-view, or you know, someone's a ref, someone's a special guest referee in the match, right? Suddenly Steve Austin is a special guest referee in a Taker match or whatever, right? Like crazy stuff. Like it was just a different era of storytelling or whatever.
Well,
right?
we had a real T-shirt wars going on because there was a time when we had a softball team. I was living in Whitburn, and we had a softball team, and we were all of our like dad's friends had softball teams, so we started a young person's team, and we all wore NWO shirts, and we were Team NWO. And then the Wolfpack broke off from the black and white.
Oh yeah.
So a lot of our team members went with the Wolfpack and went black and red.
Oh.
And so they started their own softball team. So we had quite the feud going. So then we all moved to St. John's, and I remember we had quite the feud going with the shirts for a few months in town. And I remember it came to a head. We lived on Elm Square downtown, and we only heated one room in our apartment because it was so expensive to heat. We only heated the living room on the top floor, so we all hung out up there. And if somebody wanted to come in, they'd throw a rock at the third floor window, and we'd come down and let you in the door. So I heard the tap, tap, tap of the rocks on the door. And I looked out the window, and there was three guys down in the street with black and red shirts on. And they popped open the trunk. And in the trunk, they had Tucker with his black and white shirt on in the trunk, tied up. And the door was open, and they came in the door. And I tipped over the coffee table, and there was a knife on the table. And I took the knife out. And I was in the corner fighting these guys off because I knew they were going to try to put me in the trunk with Tucker, and until they finally went away. So that was kind of, and I came home. I don't know if you remember Junctions used to be a bar in St. John's, down by the Duke down there, and we used to go to Junctions Muslim Wednesday. It was 50 cents a beer. From 8 till 10. So we'd go in and slam beers back every Wednesday. We did like 100 Wednesdays in a row. And I came back one night from Muslim Wednesday, and the couch was in the stairwell coming down the stairs. And as I went up, somebody hit me with a broom and broke it off over my back. And it was the culmination of the NWO black and red versus black and white war that was happening in my house. So we had quite the NWO feud going from like 1997 maybe till 1999.
That's sick.
That
was a big deal too. Like that was another crazy moment in wrestling history or whatever. Like the moment that that separation happened, the Wolfpack back broke off and stuff. Like, because I was like,
and
in
they
the
all came back together with the finger poke of doom, brought them all back together.
Yeah.
Right.
that was wicked.
Uh,
the little the flick, kind of
Creative control at its peak.
crazy madness, fucking crazy.
Did you watch that? Did you watch that new documentary, the new WCW documentary that was on earlier this year?
What?
What was it called? It was Who Killed WCW? Maybe was it?
No,
Yes,
I haven't seen it yet.
yeah.
No, it's one of the ones I didn't get
It's
to.
good.
It's been a while. Yeah,
It has a lot of the same footage you're going to see in, like, if you've seen any of those documentaries,
Oh,
they're all kind of the same. But there's some funny interviews in it for sure.
I think that's probably one of the top moments. I think we can all, bring up as well that definitely contributed to the death of WCW itself was just the shitty booking and stuff, like how how people go over the poke of death or whatever, and the David Arquette, what I mean, when he became champion as
I
well.
forgot about
The big blood drop where they missed Kevin Nash in the ring with the blood.
Blood, yes, you know what I mean. They kind of botched the whole Goldberg thing, and with the taser, I think was kind of a bad.
I was gonna bring up that moment.
But,
Scott, it was Scott.
You
Hall
let
with
the
taser.
inmates run the asylum. Yeah, it's not going to go so well.
Yeah, that's the thing, eh? Like,
Yeah, ECW got wild, or WCW got wild there for a bit.
kind of
Yeah.
to their own demise.
100%, yeah.
That reminded me. I had an NWO Wolfpack shirt I bought from Riffs. in,
Of course, you
in,
Boy, we
did.
would've
in
shunned
Grand
Falls, Windsor.
Shout out
and,
Riffs.
Boy, that was one of my favorite shirts.
I'm black and white
Uh,
for life.
You're black and white for life. For
That's
life.
That's so
For
funny.
life.
That's so funny. That's so funny. That was such a wicked time.
So
So
good.
that was so good. That was my favorite. I think WCW shtick or whatever was the NWO thing.
yeah.
It was so good. It was so good. It very much competed with the Austin versus the management kind of thing. Because it was Vince, but it was really the management and stuff. Well, speaking of management, so what's everybody's opinion on Shane? Because I think he's fucking badass. Like
Shane
that Jumbotron jump and a couple other things. Like he's a
Shane
savage.
O'Mac?
Yeah,
Shane O'Mac.
Shane O'Mac.
Here
Shane
comes
O'Mac.
the money.
Here comes the money. So good. So good.
I love Shane.
Yeah.
I saw Shane from a child pretty much up until fighting the friggin' Big Show
Right.
at pay-per-view. Like, I've seen Shane do crazy stuff. The cross ring drop kick to the garbage can, jumping off the cage. I mean, he's like, you say what you want about Shane. He's not afraid to give it. That's for sure.
No, man. Like I say that, like possibly, like to me, it is definitely the most nuts moment of all time. Is him jumping off the jumbotron, man. Like that's nuts. Like that is nuts.
Yeah, he's done a few big bumps where, like, even with him versus
Third
the
angle, put him through the
Undertaker.
glass.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
That's one of the
with
most
Kurt
brutal
Angle.
things I've ever seen.
The glass just would not break, and Kurt Angle would German suplex this kid. I mean, he was a kid at the time, I guess, like through this glass, and it would not
Slamming
break
his
it
neck
until
like
like the
that.
third or fourth time, and he smashed through this thing,
Oh yeah.
and he was just like almost out. He's like picked him right up again, and he put him right back through the other side. And he just like threw him right back
Yeah.
through from one side of the stage to the other through the glass, 2 panes of glass. It was so bad.
Talk
Yeah.
about fantastic wrestlers at that time. There's nobody better than Kurt Angle. Probably
Oh, yeah.
the greatest professional wrestler of all time as far as a combination of skills in the ring and personality and business skills. I mean, obviously he had a bit of a bad time with the pain pills there in the TNA era.
Yeah,
but other than that, is there anybody you would want to see wrestle your favorite wrestler than Kurt Angle? I mean, the guy was poetry in the ring.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. He had it all. He had the physical skill. He had the speed, and he had the technical abilities. He had all the right tools to, and he was pretty good. He
wasn't
ended
afraid
up
to make
being-
fun of himself.
He was.
No,
That's
he
the
was
part I
funny,
appreciate.
which
He was. He could definitely make fun of himself. Like I mean, think about all the silly things like wearing that stupid hat and
the
all
little
this stuff.
cowboy
like,
hat, with
like,
Steve Austin.
oh my
yes.
God,
Like,
man.
he eventually
the
got
Austin
him
stuff
off
is
Eddie
fucking
China,
hilarious,
like-
man. Yes, man. The stuff between him and Steve Austin is
Yes.
fucking gold, man.
Eventually,
Every one of them is like two of the boys trying not to laugh, and it is awesome
Yeah.
because you know behind the scenes they're two like pretty genuine good
Yeah.
fellers or whatever, and to see them in these is fucking hilarious. Man.
Yeah, for a guy who came in kind of relatively late
Yeah.
to the game compared to all of his peers at the time, he pretty much became very well known to be one of the best on the mic. Kind of all that generation and all that era.
Couple good blunders.
I love
too.
the story about Kurt Angle's introduction to wrestling when he went to an ECW show for the
Yeah.
first time, and they were going to sign him, and like it was the night that they crucified Big Show or Big Boss Man or someone got crucified, and Kurt lost his mind. He's like, "Don't you show me on this! If my name's mentioned on this, I'll sue you." And he's like done with wrestling at that point, but then luckily he came back.
Yeah, he wasn't too thrilled about the the birth of that probably was the birth of the Attitude Era and all that kind of extreme shit. So
Like then you had the ministry and all that stuff go on because what was the oh my god what was the leader of the ministry? What was his name?
well, the
Farouk.
Yeah.
Oh no,
Ministry of Darkness.
the ministry was it was Gangrel,
Gangrel,
and
that's
Edge
what I'm
and
looking for.
Christian, and
Mini and
So you-
Viscera.
Yeah, like you think about that's the beginning of like Christian
Viscera.
Edge and all that, right? Was that
Yeah.
ministry crap? Like that's what I say. Like there's this weird gothic because
Then you had the
Undertaker
corporate
worked.
ministry.
Yeah, because Taker worked, there was this gothic angle to everything. Right, all of a sudden, right?
corporate ministry.
The corporate ministry.
Corporate ministry.
How stupid is that? In corporate ministry.
That's what I mean. Like some of the stuff is chaotic, right? Like the general, like if you look at it from really far away, it's not that bad or whatever. But you start zooming in, it's like this is mental. It's wicked, but it's mental. I love it. I love it. It's so good. So like, what's everybody's opinion on like the current state? Like, so Caesar, what's your in terms of like what's the current state? Like, what do you feel is that now?
Yeah, I mean, I like the current wrestling to some degree. I think it, like pretty much everything these days, it suffers from overexposure. There's lots of good wrestlers, I think, around these days. I mean, you look at like Braun is a pretty good wrestler, and I mean, like I said, CM Punk's back. I'm really interested in the CM Punk stuff. I look at kind of like the difference between the trajectory of CM Punk and Chris Jericho, and how I kind of see Jericho as kind of like, I don't know, a bloated Hollywood leftover. He's like, I feel like he doesn't have it like he used to. But I look at CM Punk and I think he's still top of his game.
Yeah.
And I feel like they're both kind of from that same era. So I kind of find that's a kind of a funny contrast. But I like the content now to some degree. I think wrestling's too long now. There's too many shows. It goes on too long. They drag things out too much. It doesn't have it. I think it suffers from a lot of the same thing that the NFL suffers from, in that I grew up in a time when people weren't afraid to bust their brains out, and we weren't worried about the health of the athletes, and everything was lights out, 5-star slams. And now, for good reason, we're more concerned about the health of the people, and it's not as lights out, but the product suffers for it to some degree from what we're used to, I think.
Yeah, I would agree with that opinion of it. And I think most sports are feeling that impact, to be fair. Like,
Yep.
I think everything,
Yeah,
like if
hockey
you
same way,
very similar. Like they've taken a very, and I don't want to say like it's kind of like also thing to say, but like a European hockey approach to NHL now. And not to say that it's all about fights, and it's not. That's not what I mean. But there is a certain degree of it's not as exciting in that kind of way, especially if you come from that era when you're used to seeing it to that level, and then you see it kind of tread backwards is a bit interesting or whatever.
But you look at the NFL and how I used to get videos for Christmas when I was young of like NFL's hardest hits, and it was guys
Rock'em
pretty much
Sock'em.
crippling each other.
Yeah, like Rock'em Sock'em was the best thing. Like I get one every year for Christmas,
Right?
same thing, and it was the best. Fucking like the part where it would be like the biggest hits of the year, and it would just be people getting fucking concussed.
You do that shit now,
Over.
you're suspended for life.
Yeah, man. Like some of these things are nuts. Like the Scott Stevens hits on some of those are like outrageous, like full freight train running a dude over at 60 kilometers an hour, like holy shit, like crazy.
Remember when Bertuzzi hit that guy with the stick just before that happened? I was living in Vancouver and I was working at A&P Sound in downtown Vancouver, kind of a record electronics store, and my girlfriend at the time was working on the cash, and we got a call that there was an aggressive customer at the cash to be dealt with, and it was Todd Bertuzzi,
No
and
way.
he was returning something, and he was really, really pissed off about what was happening, and he ended up getting like banned from all the stores. And then like 2 weeks later, he clubbed that guy with the stick. So he used to always say, "Oh, you know, we drove Todd Bertuzzi, we drove him to madness."
That's wicked. Good Todd Bertuzzi story.
Yeah.
That's wicked.
Steve Moore, got whacked.
Yeah, man, that was savage. Like,
Well,
I
I lived
that was
in
savage moment.
Vancouver, so we saw everything there. I was out having a cigarette on the balcony during the Stanley Cup playoffs once, and I said to my friend, I said, "Come out and get me when the riot happens," because we remember the riots from the Rangers played the Canucks back in the 90s. And about 10 minutes later, someone taps on the window, and I opened up. They're like, "The riots are happening." And I'm like, "Yeah, joking." And they're like, "No, like really, the riots are happening." And within an hour, I could see directly downtown, and I could see a car on fire on Granville Street.
Oh my god.
Savagery. All right, guys, we're going to do some lists to
Best
end off.
promos.
A couple of best promos.
Oh my
And then we'll finish it off here for the evening here with Mr. Hulk Caesar. Okay, so we'll start with Ryan. We got a couple of promos we want to run to. So what is your favorite promo?
Oh, I can't think of another promo that's more iconic than the Austin 316. The birth of Austin 316, Stone Cold Steve Austin, after his big King of the Ring win against Jake Roberts. And Jake Roberts was a little bit at the time known for he had a little bit of a religious little religious flavor to himself, I guess you would say. I don't know.
A little evangelistic.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was
perhaps
getting,
a little-
a little. Yeah, it was getting a
Perhaps
little.
straight, right? And so Steve Austin came up and he won. He was fucking badass. He came up. He stood up at the top of that throne with Doc Hendricks.
And apparently, it was a super off the cuff promo.
Yeah.
Like
And
he
he's
wasn't
home.
fully
That's right.
fully prepared, if you will. I
Really
guess
the
is the word.
crux,
Let's hit it.
really
Yeah.
the crux of wrestling. I think this is kind of like where the wave broke right here.
Yeah, I think so.
1996.
The fourth prestigious King of the Ring, Stone Cold Steve Austin, an incredible victory.
The first thing I want to be done is to get that piece of crap out of my ring.
Get that piece of crap out of my ring.
That piece of crap out of my ring.
Get him out of the
me the full
WWF.
screen.
Because I've proved, son, without a shadow of a doubt, you ain't got what it takes anymore. You sit there and you thump your Bible and you say your prayers, and it didn't get you anywhere. Talk about your Psalms, talk about John 3:16. Austin 3:16 says, I just whipped your ass.
Oh.
Doesn't get any better.
I mean, that's like the Emancipation Proclamation of wrestling.
Oh.
Like,
Oh, man. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
and the way he moves his head, that's Stone Cold. Stone Cold moves his head back and forth when he talks.
That fucking Gustavo said so.
And that's the bottom line.
So good.
And get that piece of crap out of my
I
ring.
just loved that he was such a badass, right?
Such
He was
an
like,
angle,
man,
such a
this
good
is
angle.
Great.
This is what he learned in ECW we were talking about earlier. I mean, you went from stunning Steve Austin, who didn't really have a lot of mic presence, and you went to ECW where they let him run the mic for a few hours, and now look at him.
I
right?
guess
mean,
I could have brought up that promo that he did with Paul Heyman there in ECW, where he was talking about, he talked about Dusty Rhodes like not giving him a fair chance. He talked about the guys, all those promoters not giving him a fair chance, and then he's like, kind of just showed everyone
did,
like
yeah,
what he could
100%,
like kind
man.
of bring to the he was just like such a great.
And if you listen to Stone Cold's podcast, he's such an interesting guy in a lot of ways. He's a very simple guy in a lot of ways, but he's very interesting to hear him talk, and to hear him talk, especially to like the older wrestlers, like when he interviews like Flair or Sid Vicious or someone like that. You really hear his intelligence when it comes to wrestling.
Yeah, I would agree with that. He's a super character, and his Instagram is awesome because he lives on a farm and animals. He loves them, but they
He
also
sure
drive him
does.
fucking nuts, and it's awesome.
Yeah.
It's funny.
It's super funny, man.
So who's next on?
So what do you got? What do you got queued up next? What are we gonna do next? So we got Dusty Rhodes, I think, is the next.
Oh yeah,
one.
Dusty Rhodes Hard Times. I think it was a great
Hard
Hard
Times.
Times. Now this is classic.
One of
This
my
is like
favorites.
this
This
is
is classic as it gets.
yeah. This is
It's
This is
maybe
what
a little
many
longer,
modern
maybe a
wrestlers
little
will
longer.
base
You
their
could
own
probably
promos
even let
Dusty Rhodes and Dusty,
break it in,
your
maybe.
fans welcome you back, man.
Yeah, this is where
I think
it's at.
this speaks for itself, really, and it kind of. It's kind
Well,
of
this
a
is like this
generational
is
kinda
like
thing.
when the showmanship. Dusty is like, I mean, like he's a chubby dude who doesn't look good in the ring in his underwear. You know what I mean? Like, so this is it. He had to be the mouth of the South, kind of. You know what I mean? He had all these things going for
Sure
him or
was.
whatever, right? So like, he had to be good on the mic to get people to watch wrestling, I think. And he's a wicked wrestler, like super good wrestler, but like his mic work is the best. Like he's so good.
I don't have to say a lot more about the way I feel about Ric Flair.
But the way I feel about Ric Flair.
No honor. There is no honor among thieves in the first place.
I've always thought of how Dusty played so well off Sergeant Slaughter when they would feud, like the old AWA, and how they were so complimentary of each other in the way they spoke.
Him and Ric Flair is like a classic rivalry, right, or whatever, right?
That was kind of just after I started watching wrestling. It was kind of like just at the end of the Dusty
Oh, okay.
Ric Flair era.
Oh, sick.
Dusty was kind of when I really hit my peak in wrestling. I think Dusty had just come into WWF with the polka dots.
Oh, sick. Yeah.
Yeah,
so
I
that
always
was
thought
kinda
that was
where
weird. Like it
I
was
knew
totally
Dusty from the
different.
wrestling magazines of my youth, but the first time I think I actually saw him wrestle on television was probably WWF.
Yeah, the polka dot thing was, I think, just a power play by Vince McMahon. I'm thinking.
Probably, yeah.
They say. Vince says it wasn't, but I mean, I think we've learned that we can't really take Vince at his word.
Yeah, Vince is an interesting cat. All right, man. So we got one more from Ryan, I think. So what do we got here? It's the last one.
CM Punk.
CM Punk.
Pipe bomb.
I think so. So like I said, like I watched CM Punk. I think early 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003, like through my later high school years, and getting like a hold of VHS tapes of ROH and different stuff like that. Him and Samoa Joe and his stuff together there, and so to see him come into WWE, and then like I said, I got out of it, and then kind of I think this kind of shook up kind of professional wrestling world a little bit.
Yeah.
In its own kind of sense. I don't know if you agree with that, but
I think in a lot of ways it was kind of the real peak of the internet and wrestling coming together. Because I think I clearly remember when this speech happened and the buzz it made on the internet and how it wasn't super clear what was real and what was not. And I think that was the first time in a long time since the Attitude Era that the line was kind of blurred between real and not real. And I think it really kind of brought that realistic kind of reality television thing back to wrestling.
I think that's exactly right. Yeah. Like anyone who knew, I think anyone who was kind of like smart on the thing or whatever it was, but like kind of like you couldn't necessarily tell it like, okay, this seems kind of real. This seems kind of real. Like I'm not
It had
sure.
Stone Cold effect, right? Like everybody truly thought that he wanted to get at McMahon. You know what I mean? Like that was a real thing. Like everybody thought he wanted to get at Vince, and you know what I mean? Like it was a real rivalry, which is kind of what this was about too. I think. Fitting he's wearing a Stone
I think in
Cold.
retrospect, the pipe bomb promo he gives here is real in a lot of ways. I think it is a lot of CM Punk being truthful of how he feels about things and
It is
maybe
absolutely.
sharing a little bit more than was intended. John Cena. Cena's back now for his farewell tour.
Yeah.
Boy, I hated Cena back in the day, but it's hard to hate Cena now.
No, yeah. It was tough, yeah. I liked him like in his Thugonomics days, and he was a good rapper. He was legit. He was pretty good. And then,
Oh, I hated that shit so
and then,
much.
Yeah, I couldn't get into that either.
And
That didn't do
then,
nothing for me.
and then he became kind of the WWE superhero. But
Yeah, he
And
did take on
Peacemaker. I
that.
love Peacemaker. What a fantastic show. He's so funny in that show.
yeah, it's a good.
I had a friend who worked on Peacemaker in Vancouver and said that Cena is the nicest guy you could possibly imagine.
I bet, yeah.
He seems like a pretty legit dude. Like
He
you
seems
don't
to,
seem
yeah.
too
Like,
crazy.
he does seem like the absolute best.
Yeah, he don't
He's
seem too.
he's the
too
Make-A-Wish
crazy.
king. He's a
That's true too. Actually, I never
Yeah,
really.
it's crazy
thought of
how many
that.
Make-A-Wishes he's done. It's nuts.
He's great for people. He loves to please his fans and stuff like that. He doesn't like to bullshit or anything. He seems like a real stand-up dude.
What a dude! What a dude! This guy.
He's
That
a
new
Cena.
movie he's in with Aquafina is actually pretty funny. I forget what it's called, The Jackpot or whatever it was.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's a funny movie. Yeah, we enjoyed it.
All right, Caesar
But
Vance.
if you do listen to this whole promo and stuff like that, it did make a huge impact on the wrestling
yeah,
kinda
change
whole
the
thing at
angle.
the time, and it was kind of like things were kind of.
I think it was kind of like the beginning too of sort of the backlash to Triple H, where Triple H kind of became the Vince character to some degree. People start seeing him as the authority, and I think this was kind of like the spark of it. Of CM Punk was like the antithesis of that to some degree.
Yeah, but yeah, he breaks the fourth wall, kind of waves to the camera, says hello to Colt Cabana, his buddy, like
Not so much anymore.
not who's not his buddy anymore. Yeah,
2011. Holy shite!
So
Good promo.
Who else? What have we got here?
So Hulk, my friend, what do you got? What do you got on your list? We got a
For
couple
me,
of cues here.
Some of my most memorable promos. I mean, the most memorable one for me, which I saw live and then watched many
Yes.
times on VHS afterwards, was the Royal Rumble. I believe it was 1991.
Oh,
Ric Flair came in. He just joined WWF, and he drew number 1, I believe, in the Royal Rumble. 1 or 2. He's one of the first 2 people that came in. I believe he's
He
number
was
1.
early. He was early.
And
early.
Bobby Heenan was his manager, and Bobby Heenan was the announcer for the match, and was losing his mind the whole match. And then Flair, beyond all odds, won it. And here he is,
That area.
Jack Tunney with the belt.
Mr. Perfect in the back, so happy.
Mr. Perfect. That's a character too, man. What a gem that guy is.
Kurt Hennig. Kurt Hennig was absolute.
Perfect in every way. Kurt Hennig, one of the
Technician.
greatest wrestlers ever lived.
Super good, yeah. Suplex, unreal suplexes.
Northern Lights.
The
all
best
day.
suplexes in the land.
And to watch him spit that gum
The
out,
real world
with his
champion,
hand, boy,
because
I've
he
done
came
that
to
a
the-
1,000 times myself.
Oh, 100%.
And he came to the belt with the WCW big gold belt. He came
Yeah,
up.
the
He
big
was.
gold
He
belt.
was, and he was like.
That's true.
He held up the WWF title. He was like the real world champion.
That's right. Not a drop of cocaine in that man right there.
Not a drop.
Not a drop.
Maybe
Eyeballs. Doesn't even
Look at
blink.
Kurt.
He don't blink once
Look
the
at
whole
how happy
promo,
Kurt
man.
is.
Look at him. He don't blink once. He doesn't really. He squints and shit, but he don't close his eyes once.
Well, fuck. He's hyped. He just
People
won
take
the Royal
from you.
Rumble. He
Close
just
your
won the
eyes, people
belt.
Take from you gotta beat the
He just won the belt. Woo! The greatest thing I've seen in all my life.
I love Bobby Heenan.
Oh yeah, this is the way.
And
this
I
is when
love Mean
came
Gene.
in, right?
I love Mean Gene.
Mean
Oka.
Gene. This is when I came into play. Like this is my original kind of seeing wrestling was this type of shit. Like Mr. Perfect.
92.
Yeah.
Yeah, early like say like
91.
1990 to like 1993, 94 kind of thing or whatever, somewhere in that neighborhood. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh
Put
yeah.
that cigarette
These
out.
Flair days are awesome. Like
I
Put
love
that
it.
cigarette.
that cigarette out.
Put that cigarette out. Yeah.
Oh, it's so
The
amazing.
tear in my eye. Yeah.
Tear in my eye.
He's so stoked. You know, he's just so very excited.
He's
It's amazing.
so stoked. It's not even funny. Can't even control himself.
Hey!
Woo!
Oh, it's amazing.
Yeah, no
What
steroids.
a time.
No cocaine.
What a time
no
to be alive.
Yeah, not a bit of cocaine, not a
Great.
bit of steroids going
What a
on.
great
nothing
time.
happening. That's so funny, man. What else you got, my friend? What other couple you got on your list there?
Well, then I got, of course, when I watched this one live on television as well, when Scott Hall came through the crowd during an Alex Wright match and
This is legendary. This is
announced
legendary.
that you know who I am, but you don't know why I'm here. And that was the beginning of the NWO.
Here we go.
I mentioned this earlier in the pod. This
This
is a great,
This is jam
great
clip, dude. This is jam clip.
turning point.
What's going on here?
No one give a fuck who was wrestling in the ring.
No, what's going on here?
What the
Scott
fuck?
Hall
Like Razor Ramon? Razor Ramon just came in through the stands. Here.
coming right down beside me. What?
Holy fuck! Razor Ramon in the Canadian tuxedo, vest? What the
What a sick-
fuck?
sick vest.
Right? Beautiful.
Oh, it was a beautiful thing, man. What an art form this is.
He's just like, I'm just taking this shit over right now.
You people, you know who I am,
That's right.
But you don't.
know
Why? I'm
Why?
here.
I'm here. That was huge at the time. We were like,
Crazy.
what?
Yeah.
That's
They're
Razor
invading.
Ramon. What's he doing
He
here?
thought he was invading.
Yeah, it's crazy.
He was only on
The
WWF like a
Nacho
week
Man.
before this, pretty much, because of the recordings. And this was before Nash showed up. This Hogan's here, but Hogan's washed up at this point. You know, Pac's not here.
Yeah, that's true.
To me, Pac is. There's 4 original NWO members. I know Rick Rude was one, but he's whatever. But Hogan, Hall, Nash, and Pac to me, that's my NWO.
Yeah, that's true.
That's That I mean, when you're talking NWO, that's the legend. That's the core right there.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
I
yeah.
love Pac. I loved 1-2-3 Kid when he came out and beat Scott Hall. I watched that live on not live, I guess, but I watched that on Saturday at Superstars when the
And that
1-2-3 Kid
that was a
rolled up
huge
Scott
thing
Hall and
too,
beat
right?
him.
That was huge. Like when he came out and beat
It's
Razor
huge,
Ramon.
moment.
Like,
It's a huge moment.
Joe man.
These times are amazing. Like this is the peak of television, the peak of wrestling, the peak of so many different things happened in those like couple years in the 90s.
Nacho Man. The Nacho Man. So
Here's
funny.
a picture for you guys. I found this while we were talking about Flair. This is from Halloween, maybe I don't know, 10 years ago or so. I'd been out or Halloween, and then I went home and got undressed and went to 7-Eleven at like 3:00 in the morning to get a Pepsi or something. And who should walk in but the Nature Boy Ric Flair
What?
with slutty Hulk Hogan and slutty Ric Flair on either arm. 2 girls dressed up like Hogan and Flair, and here he is, the Nature Boy Ric Flair himself. And I went over to him and I said, "Champ, can I get a picture with you?" And he went, he was like walking around the store and strutting and like taking his robe off and dropping it in a pile and going to the end and come back and picking his robe up and putting it back on and dropping the elbow on no one. It was amazing.
Oh, my
Just
God.
amazing.
Wicked. I
Oh,
love it.
so good.
I love it. All right, boys. So we're gonna finish her off here now. So, final topic of the evening.
Oh shit.
What's everybody's favorite finisher to finish it off? So I'll start. Caesar, what's yours, my man?
All right, I got 3 I'm going to have to go with because, such a long history of wrestling finishers. I'm going to start with the Death Valley Drop.
Oh.
Death Valley Driver.
That's a good.
Driver.
That's a
yeah.
good.
Here
Yeah,
we-
like it.
Here we see Saturn doing it. Saturn was the king of the Death Valley Driver. It's back when they used to do it real hardcore on your neck. Now they do it more like a Cena bomb kind of splash. But he used to do it like crazy. Like, look at that, killing the guy. It's the Macho Man, is that he's killing? He's killing somebody.
Definitely. It looks
So
like
that's
Macho.
one.
Yeah, that's NWO Macho there. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I think so. So that's one of my favorites for sure. The Steiner screwdriver, one of my favorite moves in the wrestling game, especially.
Oh, what
Yeah,
a,
I like
what
it.
a banger that is.
That's a
Oh
banger.
my
Okay, yeah, look.
God.
Boom.
That is absolutely insane.
Brutal. I'm sure he put a lot of people with.
I've never seen him do
long-term
that
neck
before.
injuries with
That's
that move.
incredible.
I can remember that. That's like this is what I mean. Like this is this kind of stuff I remember. Like when the boys used to wear the headgear and everything, all that shit. Like,
Oh,
like a
yeah.
traditional wrestling
Steiner
outfit,
Bros.
if you
My
will.
final-
Steiner Bros.
My final one, not so much an impact move, but a move that this is probably my favorite finishing move of all time. I once put this on somebody at a party when they were drunk and they dropped
my God.
backwards and gave me a black eye the
Oh,
size
you
of a
never.
mountain. But it is the $1 Million Dream. What a fantastic move the $1 Million Dream is. I used to do that to everybody. You go grab your arm around them and then pull them from the backside with the other arm. Boy, the $1 Million Dream is a great move.
Little shake, little
So
shake.
I'd say that's probably my favorite finisher.
I like it.
Oh, I
I
love it.
like it. I like it.
Incredible.
Hit me.
For me, let's see. If I had 3, I would probably go. For me, I always loved the bad guy, Razor Ramon, and I loved a little bit of the Razor's Edge. But for me, unfortunately, I've been on the wrong end of a few Razor's Edges.
A misplaced razor.
in my life. I
Older
have, like I
brothers,
said, I
I
have
hear.
2 older brothers, and been on the wrong side of a slam onto the bed, onto my head and neck and shoulder area. Number two probably would be, because I'm such a fan, and I think it's a great kind of classic move. DDT, Jake the Snake Roberts, little
Snake,
DDT
yeah, I like that.
action. Well, bam!
Yeah,
And you,
I like
I mean,
I
classic.
always loved
Everyone
how
loves.
Jake wound up with the short arm clothesline first. He gave you the whip up
Oh,
clothesline
yeah.
and then gave you the DDT.
Absolutely.
Probably the first real example next to Hogan Big Boot, the real example of the setup for the finisher.
Yes, yeah, 100%. That was classic
yes.
stuff, right?
That's right.
Two steps to the finish.
Yes, and I was always a little bit of maybe a little bit of high flyer, a little bit of a influence. Loved a little bit of a Jeff Hardy growing up.
Honey, yeah,
a little
good
bit
call.
of a swanton bomb from the top rope.
Good call.
Give
That's a sick call.
Hit it with it.
Hardy Boys was the
Yeah.
fucking.
Yes,
Hardy
loved
Boys was
A
the
little
gear.
bit of TLC action.
Yeah, Hardy
Love
Boys
it.
was the gear.
Yeah.
That was one of my favorite tag teams of that era for sure.
Oh, my God.
Especially
Love.
when they got onto the Dudleys, that was like crazy.
Dudley's, Edge and
that's
Christian.
huge matchups. Them, the
Hardy
Dudleys, Edge and
Boys.
Christian.
Yeah,
Crazy.
that was my kind of stuff. I like that kind of that area as well. I was into the high flying, crazy people trying
Probably-
to kill themselves versus trying to kill the other person.
Probably one of my favorite WrestleMania matches of all time.
100%. Yeah. Oh yeah. I guarantee it's one up there in top five.
One of the best WrestleMania matches of all time. I think.
man, loved it.
Top five. 100%.
Oh, absolutely.
Hundy.
So yeah, that's it. What do you figure for finishers?
I'm gonna be super cliche, but this is kind of like the wrestling fan that I am
Right.
anyway. But I'm gonna go. So I'll start off with the leg drop, Hulk Hogan leg drop, because it's classic.
Yeah.
That's what got me into
Classic.
that's what got me into wrestling, was watching the fucking boot, boom.
Leg drop.
Now we're doing the fucking
Yeah.
leg drop. Right?
Remember
Like,
when Warrior
leg.
kicked out from it? That was insane.
and that's what I mean.
Kicked
Like, so
out
it's
from
like
the
a
leg drop.
legendary move, right? Like, it's, now it's kind of commonplace, but at the time, from the top ropes, that was a huge deal. And then when Ultimate kicked out, like, that was an unreal moment. Like, that was unreal because nobody got up from finishers. That was nuts. Like, that was nuts.
Yes.
So I agree with that. So that would be my, like, say, number one, just because it's like a pinnacle wrestling moment or whatever. I'm also gonna take 2 for People's Elbow because it's fucking wicked. Because I think, like, I was like a Rock and Stone Cold guy, like, as cliche, whatever, as Attitude Era against kind
yeah.
of thing. But that was like
Me
I
too, yeah.
love
Me
Stone
too.
Cold. I love the Rock, and then like heel Rock was the best. Like, heel Rock's my favorite character of all time, probably.
Love it.
People's Elbow, because of the pops, because of the sheer stupidness of it, even because it looks stupid. Like, it's literally just a bunch of stuff for someone to just do
Elbow.
nothing, really, right? Like, if somebody really did it to you, it wouldn't even hurt that bad, but it's fucking sick. And it gets a sick pop, of course, with the toss, with the
Yeah,
elbow
elbow
pad toss.
tap.
I
Oh,
love
yeah.
it, right? Like, come on. And like, I remember seeing Rocky, like, when it was Rocky Maivia. Like, I remember seeing his first match ever come out, and like, he was just kind of like Joe Blow or whatever, and lost a match. And,
He's a real blue chipper.
100%. So it was really like,
Yeah,
I don't
real
know.
blue
That's like he's a real blue.
We got a
chipper.
real blue chipper right here now.
Seemed like he was, and it's funny because at the time he seemed like it was just gonna blow by, like no big deal or
Yeah.
whatever. And then I always take a stunner because
Oh,
I always take a stunner as my like,
Fantastic.
number
What a
three.
great finisher,
Cold.
stunner.
and it's a Stone Cold stunner. It's not a anybody else stunner. It's always a
That's
Stone
right.
Cold stunner
the
because
stunner was
come on.
only ever as good as the person who took it. Like
Yeah,
someone like The
100%.
Rock.
Like,
The Rock took the
Rock
stunner
and Triple
amazing.
H.
Got a favorite?
Triple H
Yeah.
is my
Triple
favorite
H.
seller of
Yeah.
all time.
Yeah.
Probably it's pretty close to tie, but I'm gonna say Triple H only because he took the multiple stunners, like the first one he takes, and he does the stupid wobble and all
That's
the silliness,
right.
and then
Okay.
And he's
you can see
slaughtering
Stone
you
Cold,
and
yeah, like just foolishness, right? And then you can see Stone Cold like almost laughing while it's happening, but still trying to be serious the whole time. It's like my favorite because I like the comedic relief of almost these moves because
Oh,
they're so
love it.
ridiculous and outlandish that because in
Yes.
real life they wouldn't do shit,
Yes.
but in the world of wrestling they're so ridiculously over the top that it makes them awesome. Like those are my favorite finishers.
you have
My
a
favorite thing about wrestling is when they make each other crack. Like when the
Yeah,
wrestlers make
exactly,
each
man.
other
That's, like, the
laugh on
best.
television. So I love that stuff.
It's the same as like watching an SNL skit and they all, somebody laughs or whatever. Like that's my favorite. That's what makes it way more entertaining than not or whatever. Right? It's so funny. I love it. I love it.
I love it.
There we go. Finishing it off with some finishers.
The finisher.
The finisher. I love it.
Oh,
Hulkman,
so good.
thank you so much for coming on
Hulk
tonight. Thank you
Caesar.
for staying up late.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you so much, guys. I've been itching to talk about wrestling for decades, so really, really hit the spot for me.
So we scratched a big itch here tonight. So we got that.
Yes.
We got that out of your system. But yeah, man. No. cheers for coming on. Cheers to your pod, man. Everybody go check it out. Hulk Caesar Show. Spotify, check it out. Beautiful podcast. Everybody should check it out. The local taste is awesome. Along with the tunes, very solid tune choices.
Yes, man.
So everybody go check it all out.
Yes, man. The last episode had Wu-Tang Clan. I'm just like, yes, let's go.
Yeah, we
Yes.
were rocking pretty hard to that one.
Yes, man.
Yeah.
Like,
and that's
come
the
on.
best part, right? You get a little local live maybe, and then you get a little bit of Wu-Tang. Like,
Yeah.
what else do you want in your life, really?
Love it.
Yeah, so we have, by the time this episode airs, we'll already have had our first live show on YouTube. It's coming this Saturday night. Now that we're in the future and it's already happened, I guess I'll go ahead and say that
Yeah,
I
baby.
killed a man live on YouTube is what
Yes.
happened. So
I've seen it.
Go.
I've seen it
hopefully
happen.
hopefully you check that out. But we got a lot of fun things coming up in the next couple of weeks. We got a lot of artists coming through to play some tunes for us. We've got some Christmas guests coming in. We got Downtown Comics coming in to talk about Christmas gifts.
Sick.
Valmy's coming in to sing some Christmas songs for us. So we're gonna have a lot of fun between now and the holidays.
Love it, man.
Love it,
Love it,
dude.
man. Love it. It is so
Yes,
good,
man.
and it's so good to see like a local guy. As much as we are not local to Newfoundland anymore, we are still Newfoundlanders.
That's
So that's
And
that's still local
that's
to
true.
us.
That's true. We
It's
are.
beautiful, man. It's awesome, and like I say, your podcast is excellent, and especially the production work, very
Oh,
super,
so good.
super well done.
So
Um,
Thank you so much.
Yeah, man, really cool podcast, and really excited about having you on. And it was wicked to talk wrestling, and maybe next time we'll get you back, we'll talk music or something like that. We'll
Hey.
get into the similar thing, and we'll talk music or
I
something.
feel like this is the start of a journey, us together, Hulkster, and we're gonna
think so.
we're gonna have you back on here again. And we're gonna have a good old time.
Yes, sir. I think so.
Tonight was fun.
Let me
man.
tell you something here, brother.
Hey,
We're gonna keep this
we had such a
going.
good time. I love it. Hey, we had a good time. I'm
I'm stoked.
I'm stoked.
Yeah, no,
Let's
it's
go.
awesome. Cheers, man. Anything you want to plug before we head out?
No, you can just check us out if you want on Spotify, Apple, all those things. The Hulk Caesar Show, hulkshow.com. And if you're in St. John's and you want to be a guest on the Hulk Caesar Show, reach out because we love new guests.
Awesome. Check them out. Posey Row, St. John's. Love it.
Eagle has landed.